akurat tak neplatí.
Stumbling home, we don't know where we're going. Should've turned back hours ago. Out of our minds, I guess we're sleeping outside. You're still a good time, even in the cold. Get out the road, I told you. A car's coming, I stop you. You know I always got you. You know I always got you. Push it to the side, even if it means that I die. I wouldn't hesitate about it, wouldn't even think about it. I know I really love you. Push it to the side, even if it means that I die. Wouldn't hesitate about it, wouldn't even think about it. I know I really love you. Wheels in your hands, I guess we need a new plan. There's a motel a mile down the road. Finally can stand, backed and still looking for dry land. Jump on my back, I'll take you home. You know I always got you. You know I always got you. Push it to the side, even if it means that I die. I wouldn't hesitate about it, wouldn't even think about it. I know I really love you. Push it to the side, even if it means that I die. Wouldn't hesitate about it, wouldn't even think about it. I know I really love you. Love you. Love you. Always got you. Push it to the side, even if it means that I die. Love you. Hesitate about it, wouldn't even think about it. I know I really love you. Always got you. Push it to the side, even if it means that I die. Take a chance. Live your life for just one night. No looking back. 'Cause tonight will make you right. Keep this feeling, get it high. Oh, oh. Keep this feeling, get it high. Oh, oh. Take a chance. Live your life for just one night. No looking back. 'Cause tonight will make you right.
I'm looking for something very specific and I don't see it. Oh, that also sounds interesting. Ah, Purple became the number one. What the hell? That is funny. Camilla? What? Really? How can Fortinet story get even worse? It's not even possible. I guess this explains something work related. Oh, this is interesting take. Okay. Why am I not seeing it? This is where it should be, but I don't see it.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
Okay, let me switch the scene and finish my dinner while I listen to the videos. Let's go, there we go. Oh, I would have to write it correctly, that is. Anyway, what do we start with? Something simple. Shoot. All these are so interesting, not gonna lie. Some of them are just for the memes I'm opening. How many did I open and where is... Okay, this movie, I believe I saw this
The
one.
story kicked off with a glimpse into the painfully quiet life of Frank Moses, a former CIA Black Ops agent who was now living a solitary existence in the suburbs. For the past 2 years, his days had been a carbon copy of one another, a monotonous loop of waking up, doing chores, and going to bed alone. His only real human connection was with a woman he'd never met, a cheerful call center employee named Sarah Ross, who worked at the military pension office. To break the soul-crushing boredom and have an excuse to hear her voice, Frank would regularly call Sarah and pretend his pension check hadn't arrived. These manufactured problems were his only lifeline to the outside world, and his only chance to chat with the woman he was slowly but surely falling for over the phone. Frank's loneliness was palpable. He spent his days completely by himself, even decorating his house for Christmas with no one to share it with. The highlight of his month was the arrival of his pension check, not for the money, but because it gave him another legitimate reason to call Sarah. On her friend, Sarah, who was living a rather unfulfilled life herself, clearly enjoyed their chats, which went far beyond pension complaints. They talked about books and life, and Frank, completely smitten, even started reading the same cheesy romance novels she loved, just to have more to talk about. Their phone-based friendship had gotten so comfortable that Frank finally worked up the nerve to ask if he could visit her, a bold move considering they lived in completely different cities. One night, the quiet routine of Frank's retirement was violently shattered. As he got up to go to the bathroom, a heavily armed special forces team that had silently infiltrated his house moved in for the kill. The reason for the hit on a quiet retiree wasn't yet clear, but they had severely underestimated their target. The moment the attack began, Frank's dormant instincts kicked in. Years of black ops training took over, and with a burst of brutal efficiency, he neutralized the entire entry team in under 10 seconds. But the fight was far from over. Knowing more assassins were waiting outside, Frank thought on his feet. He collected bullets from the fallen soldiers, dumped them into a hot frying pan on the stove to create the sound of a return firefight, and used the
You forgot the oil.
version to slip into his basement to retrieve his old gear. As his house was being torn to shreds by a hailstorm of bullets and grenades from the outside, Frank was already one step ahead, planning his next move. Miles away, Sarah had just gotten home from dinner when her door burst open and a strange older man appeared in her apartment. Thinking he was some kind of creep, she panicked, grabbing whatever she could and throwing it at him. Her shock turned to terror when this man, whom she didn't recognize, insisted she had to come with him immediately. Frank tried to explain that she was in grave danger.
I have no words.
But there was no time for a gentle explanation. He was forced to incapacitate her, duct tape her mouth shut, and unceremoniously.
Anyway, before someone believes that this is not fair use, let me stop. What do we start with? Yeah, let's do this one.
We just introduced the new Framework Laptop 16 with the new Ryzen AI 300 series processors and the new NVIDIA GeForce RTX 5070 graphics. We actually started developing this product at the beginning of 2024, right as we started shipping the original version of Framework Laptop 16. And of course, as soon as we started shipping, we read every press review, we watched every video, we went through the community to see what people were talking about. We ran post-purchase surveys on people who picked up the product early to see what they were talking about. We went into our customer support channels to see what people were coming back with when they had issues. And all of that is what drove the development of the new generation. And obviously, whenever we start out a new product or a refresh or set of upgrades on one of the products we already have in market, we start really broad. That's like an enormous funnel of information that's coming into us. And then as we go through that design and development effort, we figure out what's actually feasible in that generation and what's something that we have to put on the back burner and maybe explore for the future, or that we figure out is actually just like totally infeasible. And most of the time, obviously, every company does this when they're building a product. Most of the time, that stuff that doesn't end up in the product ends up incinerated somewhere, locked away in a filing cabinet, obviously never to be seen again. We are going to try something different. We're actually going to walk through basically everything that we tried out on Framework Laptop 16 in this refresh cycle and talk through what didn't land, why it didn't land, and maybe some other things that we're going to explore to try to land it in the future if we figure out that it's still important to do. So we're going to go area by area. And the first one that we're going to start with is the touchpad row. This is something we've gotten a lot of feedback around. There are scenarios, and especially for some of you out there who just have specific ways of resting your palms or your arms on your laptop. We know you don't like the multi-piece touchpad row. And so this is actually the first thing that we explored, trying to find a way to improve on. And so we designed this prototype, which is actually functional, although I think this computer might be dead, just out of battery. But we tried to replace that multi-piece touchpad row with a single extra wide touchpad. And the reason this is extra wide is that we wanted to have a single module that would work regardless of where the keyboard was positioned, whether it's centered to the left or to the right. Now there's an obvious challenge here. If the touchpad is this wide, and let's say the keyboard is offset to the left side, as you're actually trying to use the thing and type, your palm's resting right on it. And from a touch perspective, palm rejection algorithms are pretty good. Like you can reasonably detect when something's a palm or a finger and not trigger touch. But if you're resting on that, you're physically pushing on it, which is going to trigger the touchpad to actually just click. And so to make a touchpad this wide and this large actually function, we designed and developed.
Am I the only one that is a little bit triggered by the fact that there is no modules on that thing?
It to be a haptic touchpad, which we know is also another thing that we've gotten a lot of feedback and asks around. So this is actually a very, very early prototype of a piezo-based haptic touchpad solution. This is maybe actually the largest piezo haptic touchpad that anyone's tried to put into a laptop. That's challenging on its own. But the other thing that was super challenging on this was trying to solve that palm challenge. And so the thing that we found as we were prototyping this is that as you rested your palm to try to just use your computer in a normal way, and then tried to trigger the touchpad by using your finger and clicking on it, that it was very, very difficult to disambiguate not the capacitive sensing, but actually the force pressure coming from your finger or your palm to be able to properly track that click occurring or not occurring. There is another challenge here, which is that if your typing over to the side because your keyboard is offset and your touchpad is still here, you don't necessarily want this full area to be the active area, especially as you're thinking about things like where is your right click region if you're just tapping here. And so one other thing that we were experimenting with was actually shifting the virtual active area based on where the keyboard was positioned, and then doing things like showing haptic feedback when you're off region, like lots of different UX explorations we were doing. And we found that like in the happy case of like you're putting a finger around and just using it generally, it was working okay. But as you started getting into like real world usage scenarios, the overall user experience was just not working. So we shelved this thing, kept the original touchpad solution from Framework Laptop 16. And this is something that we are going to continue to explore and iterate on and try to find some solution to make it work. And one other thing on this, obviously, there's like a lot of technology going in here. This is also CNC aluminum as a polymerized area here. This was super expensive, which we also know is not necessarily something that everyone wants. And so this is something that we're going to keep iterating on, hopefully at some point in the future find a better solution for. There are a couple of things we did still do on the touchpad row to improve it. One is that our supply chain team and quality team especially, along with the mechanical engineers, have worked with our suppliers to really improve the flatness spec on both the touchpad module itself and on the spacers that go around it to avoid scenarios where there could be offsets between the two that could maybe result in you feeling that edge there more than ideally you'd want to. So that's one improvement that is going in. And the other thing that would be fun, that we thought would be fun, was that we actually saw some cool projects coming up in the Framework community where people were designing 3D printed single piece solutions for that bottom row, which then of course lets you 3D print custom positions based on where you want to use that touchpad. And we decided to actually just make our own version of this off of our official CAD. And so Carol and our mechanical team just quickly pulled this together. We're still refining this a little bit, but we will publish this on GitHub so you can download and 3D print it. And actually this ended up being a lot more comfortable and usable than we expected it to be. So it actually does just slide right into that bottom row. And this 3D print was a little rough, so these tolerances might not be perfect here. You can just click it in and use it as a normal touchpad. It ends up working surprisingly well, actually. So it was a DIY-friendly solution to single piece for now, and something.
Disclaimer, I don't own Framework Laptop yet, but it is definitely something I'm eyeing a little bit. The only issue I have, if anything like that, is whatever you purchase somewhere else, something niche, whether that is Framework or System 76, is that besides the price of the laptop, which is not cheap compared to any other competition itself, there is also the aspect of like when the device arrives, because it's a little bit more on the expensive side of piece of electronics that you are buying, there will be either taxes or customs that you would have to pay. So effectively that makes the product a bit more expensive in the end.
That we'll keep investigating for the future. Another one that obviously we've heard a lot of, especially as we released the new Framework Laptop 13, was translucent bezels. And I don't blame you, this looks super cool. We all want this, I want this too. The challenge was translucent bezels, and I don't blame you, this looks super cool. We all want this, I want this too. The challenge that we found as we tried to apply translucent resin to Framework Laptop 16 is actually just this geometry here is very, very challenging to injection mold. There are a lot of big, flat, very thin areas here. And to make this translucent, we're actually using polycarbonate instead of PC-ABS. Polycarbonate is a lot more brittle, especially when you're using post-consumer recycled material for that polycarbonate. And so basically, as we actually made prototypes in polycarbonate of the bezel, which unfortunately I couldn't find offhand, as you tried to apply it or even bend it slightly, it would actually just shatter. And if you look at this this PC-ABS, you can see it's like super floppy. You can bend it, all the way 180 degrees and nothing happens. So this is just a lot more durable and compliant in a way that makes it more durable for this use case. This is another one that we're not going to give up on. We're going to keep looking for other types of resin, other maybe post-consumer recycled polycarbonate blends that are a little less brittle, or even slight adjustments to geometry to try to make this work in translucent. Hopefully something that we can solve in the future. One other one, if we get into the internals of the system, is memory. Something we've consistently been surprised by, but really maybe we shouldn't be surprised by, is just how much memory you all want. So last year, I think it was last year or late the year before that, we introduced 48 gig modules, and the attach rate on 48 gig is actually enormously high. We actually sell 48 gig modules, and the attach rate on 48 gig is actually enormously high. We actually sell more 48 gig sticks than we do 8 gig sticks, which is probably we're the only PC brand, notebook brand at least, where that's the case. And so our assumption here is that you want even more memory. So 96 gigs is not enough.
Definitely. I mean, I don't have a brand new laptop by a long shot. And even at the time when I was buying this, I was going for 64 gigs. No kidding. I was like, no. The more, the better.
If you want 128 gigs, there actually have been some higher density memory parts that have come around. And so we early on found our supplier AData, who we use today for memory, a solution that they had upcoming to use what are called CSODIMMs. They're clocked SODIMMs, actually have an extra IC on board that actually is mostly to enable higher clock rates, but in this case they designed this module also with 64 gig capacity. We tried it out. There is not official support from AMD for CSODIMM.
Is his shirt saying walk, Walkman?
At least on the generations of processors that we use. We figured we'd try it anyway because sometimes things happen to work anyway, even if they weren't originally designed to be that way, and found that actually it just does not work. To put a CSODIMM into Ryzen AI 300 series, it actually ends up running at around half speed, so a huge hit to bandwidth. That's not something that really makes sense. We decided not to proceed on that path. We did very recently find that Crucial actually...
Hold up, this is looking...
Nemusím sa nad tým srať. Mám väčší výkon, menšiu spotrebu a proste neriešim. Chápeš?
Does make a non-CSO DIMM to proceed on that path. We did very recently find that Crucial actually does make a non-CSO DIMM, regular SODIMM, DDR5 64 gig module. We did just some very basic tests on this, and it did function. We obviously want to do a lot more validation efforts, since as far as we know, these haven't been specifically validated by AMD on this platform before we make any kind of like broader recommendation for using this. But if we do find that these work, which hopefully they do, that'd be great, we'll go ahead and update our knowledge base information and potentially even bring this into our marketplace as something that we sell as well. So that was one that's likely actually going to come in the future, these non-CSO DIMM high-density 64 gig modules. You get 128 gigs. Okay, input modules. That was the next one. Something that we hear over and over again across our entire product lineup is that people want pointing sticks. You might know it as TrackPoint from other brands, the little nubs that you can use as a mouse. Obviously, if you're a ThinkPad user, former ThinkPad user, that might be something that you're very
clitoris, you mean?
familiar and comfortable with. And so it is something that actually on all of our products, several times over the last 5 years, we have tried to prototype and make work. The big challenge on this actually is just that there's very, very little space here. The Z stack here is incredibly thin. And for a keyboard, it works because the keys are compliant. If there's force that's put on the lid, like let's say you've got your laptop in a backpack with a book or something just being pressed on like that.
Oh yeah, eventually you have the problem with the drift.
The screen is going to touch the keys, and the keys are going to give way because they're just on these scissor mechanisms, and the screen will be okay. And you make it a little smudgy, you have to wipe off, got like finger grease on there. Pointing stick though is not compliant in that way. So you've got this like sharp point base.
This looks an interesting topic too.
Je to také celkom triky, že sú banky, ktoré ti povedia, že od určitej verzie Androidu, napríklad sporiteľňa to takto robí. Sú banky, ktorým to je úplne uprdele, sú banky, ktoré to robia podľa toho, že Ježiš, teraz sme začali používať nejakú feature, ktorú...
Okay.
Sticking out from the keyboard, and if there's pressure placed on the lid, that's going to go right onto that point on the tracking stick and end up damaging the screen or have a high likelihood of damaging the screen. And so we've just kept over and over, we kept trying this and seeing if we could get a low enough profile.
Fun fact, there is actually a possibility that if you have a laptop with that track point or whatever it's called, and you have clearance issues between it and the screen, you will eventually see on the screen that it made an imprint because of how much the laptop is being pressed regularly or because there is not enough spacing. I did see that on some laptops somewhere.
Pointing stick solution.
Not that it would be like, you know, scratch the screen. No. Just, you would see that it's visible that it was there.
To make that work, not risk the screen at all. And so far, that doesn't exist. That is something that we keep going into the supply base to try to find. Hopefully, that is something we find in the future. Because, of course, with this input module system on Framework Laptop 16, it would end up being relatively straightforward for us to just make an input module, a keyboard that you can swap in that's got that pointing stick. Unlike, even our other laptops where you'd have to have an entirely new input cover to get that kind of functionality.
Thought you should know.
Also, on input module.
Thank you for showing up. Enjoy your stay.
modules. One other cool thing that we have shown off, we've actually talked about even at our launch event earlier this year, is the one key module. So this is a module that lets you develop custom input modules. Like we showed off this ortholinear keyboard. This is actually a functioning mock-up that we showed at the event. This is still in progress, so this is not a we tried and we couldn't get it to work. This is actually this is working. It's taken a lot of work with our suppliers to make it work, and we still need a bit more time on this to get it mass production ready. And part of the reason for this is that even though structurally from a
Imagine, because this is one step away from making something like a Stream Deck. Imagine if all these buttons would actually also contain a little display that could show you something. And then you can order a keyboard whatever size you want. You are not limited to what Steam Deck is making. The only issue is it's probably gonna be hella expensive. And I'm not sure if it's even doable this way. I don't know how Steam Deck is actually doing it. I know they have buttons and they have a way to put something on the buttons.
Mechanical standpoint, we're using the same keycaps, we're using the same internal plastic parts as we do on our regular keyboards. The rest of the mechanical structure and the entire fabrication assembly process is very different than what goes into a keyboard because it has to be separable.
Hold up, I need to check, or I want to check something real quick. Seriously, mate. That's not the kitchen. Kitchen is there. Okay.
By individual keys. And so this little dome here, for example, ends up being hand placed piece by piece, as opposed to having a single membrane that applies across the entire sheet, which is just much simpler. And the mechanical structure overall is just very novel and something that our suppliers obviously are working very hard on with our mechanical team and supply chain team. And part of what we've been doing over the last few rounds of iteration on this is really focusing on bringing up the manufacturing yield so that we can make this available at a reasonable price. If you're building a keyboard, you'll need literally like 100 of these things, so the cost really starts to add up if the per key price ends up being high. So that's something that we are iterating on now. And obviously, as soon as this is in a place where it is MP ready, we'll start seeding this out to a few developers, and then we'll make an announcement and make it broadly available through the Framework Marketplace. We've got one last one that also is actually in progress. So not something that...
Hold up, I'm gonna check one more thing. Because I'm partially dying here. Outside is 20 degrees, but because the air is not moving, it's... Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Is on the back burner, something that we're actively developing. When we create new modules, especially major upgrades like this graphics module with the new NVIDIA version that we are releasing right now, we want to make sure that upgrading doesn't result in generation of more e-waste. So on our Framework Laptop 13, for example, when we did a new mainboard generation, we introduced that Cooler Master mainboard case, so you can use the mainboard on its own. We want to make sure that there is a pathway to reuse graphics modules coming out of the Framework Laptop 16 rather than them going and sitting in a drawer, or worse, going out into a landfill somewhere. And so back in 2023, actually, when we first announced the Framework Laptop 16, we showed this very early prototype of an eGPU where you could slot in a graphics module. We kept developing this. What we realized actually fairly early on is that it didn't really make sense to build this like incredibly polished, very consumer-ready eGPU because it just drives the cost up by a lot. So the mechanical parts here, also what we've done electrically, even on this prototype, is just a very expensive path. And to make sure that that reuse scenario like actually logically, realistically makes sense, we knew that it actually has to be much cheaper and much simpler. And in doing so, actually not be really consumer targeted as a general purpose eGPU, but actually more something that is DIYer, builder, maker focused as the starting point for people to build on top of for different.
Oh my god, I just got an idea. Imagine if Framework, aside the laptop and making it more sustainable and reusable, they would actually also allow or support for you to take your previous laptop and put it into a rack mount server. You know, just throw some cooling in there so that it's happier in the rack. And then, you know, if you throw a couple of parts from the Framework laptop into a rack mount chassis, that might even be like, you know, from a 3D printer, you can print it part by part and then assemble it. And then you can basically have, I don't know, 2 or 4U rack. That rack would actually support framework laptops that would actually look like they are Blade servers. Maybe it will not be in a Blade as such, but the sheer amount of them that you can cram into a 4U rack space would probably be very close to what a Blade server does. That would be amazing.
And really still be able to reuse and leverage those graphics modules. So this is something that's actively in development. As soon as we have something to share on this in terms of the actual final product solution that we're going to deliver, we will share more on it. That is something that is not going to be in the next few weeks, but is something that we are actively developing and hope to share more on soon. So that is everything, all the major.
Interesting. It's not picking the AC at all.
Stuff anyway. There are probably some other smaller things that we did try out that didn't quite make the cut. We did get a lot into the new Framework Laptop 16 between the graphics module, display outputs, the keyboard firmware and keyboard artwork, the new mainboard generation, and the new top cover with the new CNC geometry. So a ton that we were able to pull off. The team did awesome work on this generation, and we've got a bunch of learnings from all of this stuff that's going to continue to pay off in the future as we continue to build new versions, really all of our products. So that is everything. I hope that helps you understand a bit more about what goes into making products that are this complex. And I actually don't really need to ask this because I know you're going to do it anyway, but definitely please leave comments below with anything else that you would like us to try out, whether that's on the Framework Laptop 16 or on any of our other products. Thanks.
That ending was like best of. Where should we start, mate? SVGs. Why not SVGs?
I love SVG, and I really hope that's not a controversial take, unlike my WebP takes that y'all did not seem to like so much. SVGs are scalable vector graphics. They let you represent an infinitely high resolution or low resolution image with a very small amount of data. They're an incredible format that powers so many things that we use and love every single day. That all said, I need to be honest with you guys. I don't really understand them. I've opened an SVG file many a time and changed like the fill color a bit. I've made many of them myself using other graphic software, but if you told me to sit down and write an SVG, I don't know if I could. And it also seems like something AI is pretty bad at, funny enough too, so I guess it's time to learn about SVGs, right? Thankfully, Josh Comio, the absolute legend, just put up an awesome article breaking down how SVGs actually work. I'm so excited to dive into this one because I have always felt a little gimped by my lack of proper in-depth knowledge of SVGs, especially when it comes to animation stuff. I know there's some weird history about how animations do work in SVGs, but it's not officially supported. You're supposed to do it with CSS. Oh God, I'm not excited about that part, but I am excited to learn a lot more. I have a good feeling about this one. Every time I cover Josh's work, it becomes one of my best videos. I have a feeling this is going to be one of those cases. If you think it's hard to make smooth SVG animations, you have no idea how hard it is to do a smooth sponsor transition. So we're going to cut straight to it and then dive in. Friendly introduction to SVG. SVGs are one of the most exciting technologies that we have access to in browser. We can do so many cool things with SVG. It's an absolutely critical part of my toolkit. Here's a quick montage of things that Josh has done. Those are all actually really cool. That's nuts. Done. Those are all.
Being done with SVG. Oh, I was thinking that SVG is just an image defined by, you know, instructions so that you can scale it and everything. I knew that part, but animations and stuff.
Actually really cool. That's nuts. Josh is really good at what he does, like one of the best in the industry. The fact that he is within the best like web dev, CSS design people, and instead of just doing that and selling that as a service, he is making educational resources. If you have an education budget at your work, you should spend some of it on his stuff, even if you don't use it, just to support his existence, because we're so lucky to have someone as talented as him creating these resources. It's unbelievable. Anyways, SVGs are also pretty intimidating. The rabbit hole goes deep, and it's easy to get overwhelmed. I've certainly felt that myself. So in this post, Josh wants to share the most important fundamentals to provide a solid foundation that we can build on. He'll show us why SVGs are so cool, and he's also going to share a few tricks that we can start using right away. Hello, SVG. At its core, scalable vector graphic is an image format like JPEG or GIF. We can pop them into an image tag like any other image. This works, but it's also not what makes SVG so cool and interesting. The real magic happens when you use an inline SVG. Most image formats like JPEG are binary formats. If you try to open them in a text editor, you'll see a bunch of gobbledygook. SVGs, by contrast, are specified using XML syntax, just like HTML. Instead of specifying the RGB color for each pixel, SVGs contain the set of drawing instructions required to render the illustration. Somewhat magically, we can drop the raw SVG code right into an HTML document. Here we have an SVG that's 100 pixels wide and tall, with a circle. It's filled hot pink. Its radius is 30. Its X and Y, I think CX and CY are like width and height. Is it the 50? Can I change this? Oh, it's a position. Yeah, so it's relative. It's center X and center Y.
I was surprised that he was thinking that it's the size of the circle for a split second there. Like, if you have... Oh.
Positions are 50-50, so it's right in the middle. Makes sense. Thank you, chat. I realized that right as chat corrected me. Thank you, guys. As you can tell, we're about to learn a lot together. In HTML, we're given a set of primitives that are all document related. Paragraphs and headings and lists, the same primitives that you get in Word. SVG is the same sort of deal, but all the primitives are for illustrations, things like circle and polygon and path. I'll be honest, I feel like when I look at an SVG, all I see is a shitload of paths. I'm curious how much the other things matter. I'm sure they do more than I give it credit, but in my experience, they haven't mattered a whole lot, so this will be a fun thing to learn. The really cool thing is that SVGs are first-class citizens in the DOM. We can use CSS and JavaScript to select and modify SVG nodes as if they were HTML elements. Here's an example of that. We can focus or tap the element, and when we do that, the CSS applies to the pieces of the SVG. So we fill the circle with hot pink, so we don't even have to put the color there. And then on hover or focus visible, we make it bigger and we move
Yes, I like this very much.
the position. We could also change the fill to be red, and it'll change. Isn't that cool? And I'm going to put the fill on a transition too. And look at that. If I make it 1500, it'll be way slower with the red. Show me a GIF that could do that. Many SVG
Point taken. Not gonna lie, point taken on that.
attributes like the circle's color and radius moonlight as CSS properties. That means I can change them in CSS and even use CSS.
Is there a link to that site? No, not in the text, please. I want the text, not the stupid YouTube bullcrap. Okay.
Transitions to animate them. This is what makes SVG so powerful. It's like an alternate reality version of HTML that focuses on illustrations instead of documentation. We can use our existing CSS and JS skills to make them dynamic. Oh, this scares me, but I'm excited. Writing SVGs by hand. It might seem a bit counterintuitive, but I often create my SVGs in a code editor rather than using design software like Illustrator or Figma. Design software can export to SVG, but it tends to mash everything together in a single path element. Suddenly, my biases are making sense. This makes it much trickier to animate individual elements, which is, in my opinion,
But those animations depends on CSS, right?
coolest thing about SVG. It does depend a bit on what you're doing. Beyond a certain complexity, it's a lot more practical to do it in specialized software. But for the sorts of things I showed in the montage above, I think it's easier to code them by hand. You see a little one there when I hover. Well, yeah, he's good at this. I take his word for it. I'm excited to get good enough at it that I can actually hover, well, above. I think it's easier to code them by hand. You see a little one there when I hover. Well, yeah, he's good at this. I take his word for it. I'm excited to get good enough at it that I can actually write them by hand. Let's see how this goes. As we saw above, SVG contains its own set of UI primitives. Instead of div and button, we have shapes like circle and polygon. Let's go through them. The most Basic is a line. You have x and y coordinates, x1, y1 for the first point.
For work-related reasons, I was today using Draw.io, which is a cool solution and app I would recommend because it's for making diagrams and everything. But right at this moment, I was thinking, you know what? Making that diagram that I wanted to make and originally I started in Paint, okay, in PBrush. Later on, I was like, okay, let me use something better, and I didn't want to use the add-on that we have in Confluence in the customer premises on the services. I was like, I want something less painful than this add-on that we have there for the Enterprise Wiki. So I was leaning towards Draw.io because to me Draw.io is better option. But now I'm thinking, you know, wouldn't it be interesting to actually make that diagram in SVG? It should be technically possible. It would be a little bit crazy. Because it's just a stupid diagram with like a couple of blocks, you know, embedded into each other and then some text, and that's it. Can actually SVG do text? It should be able to, right?
And x2, y2 for the second. You can give it a stroke, which is any color that your browser supports, as well as a width for said stroke. Oh, look at that. You gave us knobs. Such a basic thing, but already we've done something we can't easily do in HTML. The only way to draw a diagonal line in HTML is to create a long, thin DOM node and rotate it, which quickly turns into an advanced math problem if you need that line to start and end in specific places. Oh man. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. Oh, it made sounds? I didn't even hear the sounds. Oh, Josh, you've done so good. That's so good. Anyways, one thing I can relate to here, it's not exactly the same. I made a dumb game and I think this would have been 2021 if I recall. Dogecoin Simulator. It's very inspired by Universal Paperclip, but you're trying to maximize your return on.
Oh my god, I just thought about there is this small game project and I could make the pictures for that in SVG too. Would be an interesting upgrade.
On Dogecoin. I made it during the Dogecoin bubble. And something I really, really wanted to do, and you can see I kind of pulled it off here, is I wanted all of my borders to be really shitty and hand-drawn. I really wanted to make my borders on buttons not lined up right. And it was so hard to do. I think I'm like using a mask that is an image on top of an SVG or something like that for this. I spent a lot of time trying to figure it out, and this is the best I could end up doing. Making things in HTML that aren't just straight lines or border radius is pulling teeth. I just got told about an Easter egg. And if you know anything about me, you know I cannot help myself when it comes to Easter eggs. Oh.
Nice.
That's cute. Back to it. So if you want a diagonal in SVGs, it's very easy. By default, a line is invisible. In order to actually paint it, we need to give it a color, and you can also give it a stroke width to make it thicker, so it's actually clearly visible. Stroke and stroke width are both examples of presentational attributes, as opposed to the XY, X2, Y2, which are geometry attributes. We'll learn more about the difference soon. Now we have rectangles. I wonder what those are. X, Y, width, height, fill, stroke, stroke width. Makes sense so far. But now we have fill. Well, let me change that. Oh, that's because
What did Phil do? I'm joking.
the presentational stuff comes up later. At first glance, this looks like a div with a border, but there's a few core differences. First, the stroke is drawn on the center of the path, not on the inside or the outside. That's actually very interesting. The amount of like border box bullshit I've dealt with in my career is interesting. Center of the path, not on the inside or the outside. That's actually very interesting. The amount of like border box bullshit I've dealt with in my career, this just kind of solves it. Yeah, so as you make it bigger, you end up reducing the space on the inside and expanding on the outside too. Hard to do math around, but consistent, at the very least. This is true for all shapes, not just rects. Unfortunately, it's not configurable. You can't specify that a shape should have its stroke drawn on the outside or the inside. Another interesting thing to note is what happens when you reduce the width or the height to 0. You might expect it to become a straight line, but instead the whole shape disappears. Very interesting. In the SVG spec, these sorts of shapes are known as degenerates. Feels pretty harsh to Josh. I don't know. I got a lot of degens here. I don't think it's that offensive. When a two-dimensional shape like a rectangle only stretches across one dimension, it's considered invalid and it doesn't get rendered. Apparently a few years ago, some browsers would still paint degenerate shapes when others wouldn't. I can see Firefox being fans of degenerate shapes. Makes sense. But now all modern browsers follow the spec correctly. Sorry, chat. You are what you are. You know what you are. We can round the corners too, though, using the Rx and RY properties similar to border radius. But you can specify the X and Y rounding differently, so you can get much different curves. Oh, this is a really good visualization. The Rx and RY are almost as if you're drawing a circle or an oval from the corner, and the shape of that circle is what determines the radius. I really like this way of visualizing that. Ellipse, sure, thank you, chat. You get the idea. I work on databases, not user interfaces. I know I'm stereotyped as the JS guy, but hopefully this is showing you guys UI design are not my strength. Speaking of ellipses, time to go to the circle. A center X and center Y position, because you're positioning it based on its center point. I like that because it's not X1, X2 like it was for the other things. It's the center point. Makes sense. Makes it a little hard to position things relatively, like getting the circle right next to a rectangle could be annoying because you have to calculate based on this and radius relative to the X1, Y1 positions on another rectangle. And like with rectangles, circles will disappear entirely when the radius is set to 0. Oh, and then we have ellipses, which are separate from circles, so I guess they are different things. And here we can change the horizontal and vertical radius. And again, if either is 0, it disappears. Cool. There's also polygons, which are a set of points. I like that you can give it an array of points effectively. It's pretty cool. Dope. The points attribute takes a list of XY points. The browser will draw a line between each point and from the final point back to the first. I found this a bit confusing when I was learning SVG. In my brain, the term polygon refers to something very specific. Shapes that have rotational symmetry like triangles and squares and hexagons and octagons. Yeah, these are regular polygons, though. They're a flat subset of a broader polygon world. He loves his Easter eggs. Cute. To create regular polygons,
Wait, what is that?
though. They're a flat subset of a broader polygon world. He loves his Easter eggs. Cute. To create regular polygons, we need to use trig. Oh boy, trigonometry. I was actually really good at trig in high school. It's a bit beyond the scope of the blog post, but I'll put the calculations in the playground if you'd like to learn more. These aren't that complex. Yeah, the rotation offsets for evens. That's fun. And now a bit about SVG formatting. In the demo above, I use commas and new lines to make the set of points clear. Extra characters are considered superfluous by the SVG spec. They're valid, but unnecessary. Most of the SVGs you'll find in the wild will look more like this. Interesting. So this is XY for point 1, XY for point 2, XY for point 3, XY for point 4. I did not know that the commas and all of that format is just ignored entirely. It's like the opposite of Python. I don't know about you, but I find it so much harder to make sense of this list of numbers. I absolutely agree, yes. In the past, this sort of optimization could make a small but significant difference in performance of our websites and web apps, but these days, web servers use gzip compression, which means that a few extra commas and new lines won't really affect the file size. So I'd strongly encourage you to add helpful formatting to your SVGs. Your users won't notice, but other devs on your team and your future self will benefit from readable SVGs. Yes, absolutely agree. There are a couple other primitive shapes like polyline and text, but we've covered enough for now for, again, an intro blog post. Let's move on. Scalable SVGs. Up until now, we've been using absolute coordinates for things. That means that our SVGs must be a very specific size, otherwise things break. Oof. Yep. I'm sure we've all had this happen before. We're trying to render an SVG and it just got clipped by the SVG width and height. Am I finally going to learn how to keep this from happening? Because that'll be really nice. I've done a lot of hacks to get around this. I've spent the only time I ever open an SVG is to hack on like relative paths to try and make it fit in a different shape. In this demo, the circle is meant to sit in the center of a 300 pixel wide element. When the element is given a smaller width, however, the circle doesn't shrink, it gets cropped. That's not how most images work. When you render a JPEG, the photo will scale up and down with the element size. One not great solution. Oh, thanks for dropping in, Josh. I highly recommend checking out his newsletter if you haven't yet. I'm already on it. You should be too. One not great solution for this issue is to dynamically recalculate all the values based on the width. So as we shrink it, we can change the cx and cy based on the width value in JavaScript, which sucks. This works, but it's a huge pain, even for a very simple illustration like this. Fortunately, there's a better way. ViewBox. Nice. The ViewBox attribute defines an internal coordinate system. When it's provided, our circles and rects and polygons will stop inheriting the raw pixel values from the DOM, and instead they'll use the internal coordinate system. This is xy1, this is xy2. That learning has already unlocked so much for me. So the top left corner is 0, 0, and the bottom right corner is 300, 220. Is this one editable? This one's not editable. But this also means you can do negative in the corners for the view box if you want to position things differently. It means you can turn into a square or rectangle or whatever other shape you want, and then you only have to set width or height, and it can figure out the rest from there. Very good. Somebody said, so view box is a rect? Yeah, boxes are a type of rectangle. Makes sense. The viewbox attribute defines, yep. The viewbox takes 4 numbers, but really we can think of it as 2 pairs of 2 numbers. It's the top left and bottom right. Oh, look at that. I called it. Oh, that's such a cool visualization. That's so cool. We're changing the view box as we move this around. So in 0, 0, it's in that corner. And the box is 200, 200. We can see the extra space there. This is a really, really good visualizer for explaining this. Good shit as always, Josh. The view box actually kind of works like the viewport. This blog post, for example, is much taller than the browser window, so a portion of the lesson is shown in the viewport. You can change which part you're looking at by scrolling. The same sort of idea with a view box. This is a cool call out here about it being infinite, though. One interesting difference between HTML documents and SVG illustrations is that SVGs don't have edges. In theory, they extend in every direction by an infinite amount. There's nothing stopping us from placing a shape 1 million pixels away from the origin point in any direction. The view box decides which part of this infinite field we're looking at. Let's talk about
Uptime 1 hour 7 minutes 14 seconds.
the second pair of values used for the view box. These 2 values allow us to specify the width and height of the viewable area. So that's the view box size, and then we're shifting that. But again, I'm thinking of this as the top left and the bottom right. If we set this to 30, 30, okay, so that's still in the negative, so that's not right actually. So this is the XY origin point, and this is how far from X and how far from Y you're allowed to go. So if we have like negative, I'll do negative 40, negative 40. So we have negative 40 for the XY, and then 30, 30 for the size. That means this goes from negative 40 to negative 10, negative 10. This number gets added to this number to know the furthest X coordinate, and then this number gets added to this one to know the furthest Y. Yeah, as I was saying, the second pair of values that we pass to ViewBox controls how much of the infinite SVG field we're actually looking at. It doesn't change the size of the SVG, that's controlled with width and height. Instead, it changes the zoom level, effectively. I like this way of thinking about it. In the demo above, our SVG is 300 by 300. If we set the view box to 0, 0, 300, 300, we have a perfect 1-to-1. But if we do 0, 0, 150, 150, the SVG is still 300 pixels by 300 pixels, but it's only displaying the 150 to 150 zone area of the SVG canvas. I like this analogy. It's like using the browser zoom function, command and plus and minus, which I use all the time. It doesn't change the size of the browser window, but it scales up everything within to 2x the original size. So we've seen how the viewbox attributes can be used to slide the viewable area around or to zoom in and out. To be honest with you, I'm not sure I've ever done either of these things. The only realistic use case I can conceive of for shifting and zooming the viewbox is if you have a gigantic chart with lots of detail and you want to guide the user through it by jumping from one section to another. I've also never seen this used. I mean, it's used for defining the SVG, but not for moving it around dynamically. The value of showing you this is to understand how the viewbox works, but in practice, we'll be keeping these values static. And again, part of the magic of SVGs is that they're vectors, which means that they're not pixel values. I mean, we literally do have pixel values for the X and Y coordinates, but they're not pixel values like they are in an image where every single pixel has a color assigned to it, which means when you start zooming in on an image, you will start seeing pixels. When you zoom in on an SVG, you won't because they're scalable vector graphics. They are drawing lines at whatever resolution you choose to zoom in on. Yeah, as they say here, we can zoom as much as we want without losing sharpness. It is pretty magical that we can zoom in by 10 or 100x and the image continues to look sharp. Like, it feels really, really cool. And now we have presentational attributes. In SVG, our shapes can either be filled in with the fill attribute, outlined with the stroke attribute, or both. The fill attribute is pretty self-explanatory, so let's focus on strokes. They're kind of like HTML borders, but way more powerful. Try flipping between the different variants here to get a sense of what's possible. Oh, the animations are so cool. The stroke line cap field in particular is really cool. Square, and you can choose how big each dash is. I didn't know that. That's really cool, actually. What? Okay, this is the biggest mind blow for me. I had no idea that strokes had that level of customization. If you've just been listening as I go through this, like, look at this point, because this is really visually cool. You can specify the dash array to choose how big the start and end for each dash is. At least that's my assumption. I'm sure we'll have this explained in a second, but that's so cool. We control the presentation of the stroke using a handful of stroke CSS properties. We can also set them as inline attributes. So instead of setting stroke width 5 in CSS, we can set it with just directly in the SVG itself. Here's a quick breakdown of these values. Stroke sets the color. Default's transparent. Stroke width sets the width of the stroke in pixels. Stroke dash array, this is the one I was excited about, sets the width of each segment in the gap between them. So we pass two values, like 10, 20. We're saying we want a 10 pixel dash with a 20 pixel gap between them. We can even specify a repeating pattern by specifying more than two values. Okay. So here we want the stroke to be 0, but with a gap of 20. So that's the big empty spot. And then we want a stroke that's 26 with a gap of 60. Where does that dot come from then? I don't know if I get this yet. Oh, is it because 0 still is a dot? That's it. Okay. So even though it's 0, it still shows something because that's a dot. That's the part I was missing, is that you can't skip a section on the dash array. You always have to put a value at the start. And if the value is 0, that just means it's a dot. So there's a dot, a space of 10, length 25, space of 10, dot, space of 10, length of 25, space of 10. That makes sense now. So for this one, dot, space of 20, 26, space of 60. And you can choose how you want the ends of each of those dashes to be capped off. So you can use round, square, or the default value of butt. It is weird that the squares are all staying square for these, because they are like horizontal and vertically aligned straight, not aligned with this like they would have been if it was butt. If I change this from square to butt, we lose the dots. Okay, 4 would still be a square. But here, the squares are rotated based on the position in this. Where if we put 0 with butt as the stroke line cap, they disappear. If we change that to square, they stay aligned with like the page, not with the stroke. Very interesting. All cool things to know. But it's the thing I would never have guessed, and he kind of danced around it with using butt here and not having the spots in between, is that when you use something other than square and round, so when you use the default, which is butt, the 0 values don't get rendered. Apparently, if I make this 1, it will be aligned again. That's very interesting. This is like an edge case for if you have a 0 width dash. I hope he touches on all of this. This is a very interesting set of edge cases we've discovered. Oh no, it doesn't look like he does. Well, now you have homework if you want to understand more about this. Next, we have animated strokes, which he was absolutely using in that example. You can set transitions for all these different pieces at different speeds. So when they change, they'll animate. That's really cool. In the demo above, he's smoothly interpolating between the different stroke styles using very basic CSS transitions. There's also a separate dash offset that lets you slide the dashes around the shape. I was wondering about how that would work. That's really cool. You can even set up an infinite animation with this. Very, very cool. I'm starting to understand how to do animations in SVG correctly from this. The thing I was hinting at earlier is that you can inline CSS in an SVG so that the .svg file itself has the animation baked in. In certain places where you can upload an SVG will let you have an animated image as a result. So like if there's certain services that let you set an SVG as your pro pic or your background, you can add the CSS in there and it might work. Animations in SVGs directly is deprecated according to most things tracking web standards, but you can do it. For a seamless effect, you want to make sure that the stroke offset equals the combined length of the dash plus gap. Otherwise, you'll notice a flicker when the animation loops. Makes sense. If you animate the dash length and offset, you can actually create a fancy spinner with it. Oh, that's beautiful. Nothing is loading here. I'm just demonstrating the spinner itself. I would hope we've all been to that one GitHub account, that one GitHub repo, the SVG spinners repo that has a whole bunch of different spinners that are SVGs plus the CSS for them. But now that we understand this, let's look at said CSS. Fix that. There we go. We now have the actual CSS that is inside of this loading spinner. Transform origin center, animation uses the one that it defined here, the keyframe, 1.5 seconds, linear, infinite. And it transforms by rotating it 360 degrees. Super, super easy. Cool. Learning a lot as we go. Finally, the most famous trick is to create an illusion of an SVG drawing itself. I've always been curious how this one works. The clever trick here is that we have a single dash that is the same length as the entire circumference of our shape, 763 pixels in this particular case, and a huge gap between each dash. We draw the shape by sliding this dash into place by animating the stroke dash offset. Interesting. That's actually really cool. Because the dash offset starts before the dash starts, this doesn't render, even though the dash is super long. But when we click draw, it sets the dash offset to 0, and the animation moves the path into frame effectively, which causes it to appear. Very cool stuff. But how do we figure out the circumference of the shape? We can use JavaScript to calculate it. We select the polygon, path length is element.get total length. This is the magical method to get said circumference. And then we set the stroke dash array to path length, comma, some arbitrarily large value. This is the ideal solution to the problem since it gives us the precise length, but I've also solved it in the past with trial and error, guesstimating the length until it looked right. You can also manually override it. Apparently, several readers had reached out to Josh to point out the existence of the path length attribute. The attribute lets you specify an override for path length. So here we have it set to 100. When we define path length, we're essentially creating our own scale for the path. The polygon still has an actual path length of 763, but we're redefining it as 100. The browser will do the work behind the scenes to scale everything up, but in our CSS, we can act like the full circumference is 100. He's not sure he likes it. It's easier to set up and there's no unintended consequences, but we're essentially telling the browser to pretend the path is different than it actually is, and that feels funky. Good call out though. That's a cool trick. The power of SVGs. My goal with this post was to give you a high-level understanding of what SVGs are and to share some cool tricks that you can start using in your own work. But there's so much more that we can do. We've only scratched the surface. He's working on a whole course about all of this, specifically animations, but SVGs are a huge part of it, of course. And once again, if you want to try it out, links in the description. Everything Josh has done has been worth every cent and more. Highly, highly recommend checking that out or any of his other incredible courses. His CSS for JS devs is legendary. His Joy of React is one of the best React courses. His CSS for JS devs is legendary. His Joy of React is one of the best React courses I've ever read. Josh knows what he's doing. Highly, highly recommend checking out his stuff. Thanks to him for writing yet another incredible article. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. I know that at the very least, I suddenly understand SVGs a hell of a lot better. This helped me a ton. I hope it helps you too. Till next time, keep painting your paths. This helped me a ton. I hope it helps you too. Till next time, keep painting your paths.
Some people are way too obsessed with only one thing. It's like, hello, Derek, have you heard about stuff that isn't vintage pinball machines? We could be talking about the only thing actually ever worth talking about, which is tech news. Google search was ruled a monopoly in 2023, and the judge behind that ruling just issued another one to say that's mostly okay, actually. Monopolies, often unfairly maligned. In his ruling on remedies for the case, U.S. District Judge Amit Mehta said Google will not have to sell off Chrome or Android like the U.S. Department of Justice wanted. After much deliberation, the judge concluded a Google breakup would be incredibly messy, which is exactly why I tell all my friends in toxic relationships to stay together. Who wants the hassle? Google will also also be able to continue paying Apple around $20 billion a year through a revenue sharing agreement for Google searches made through Safari. And Google can also continue making those payments to Mozilla, the maker of Firefox, who relies on those payments for about 85% of its revenue. You ask yourself if Firefox is worth letting Google keep passing go and collecting $200. But Google isn't getting off scot-free. It can continue to pay companies to preload their services and products, but those contracts cannot be exclusive. Other companies are allowed to do the same. Google will also have to share some of its search index and user interaction data with their competitors and offer search and search ad syndication to their competitors at standard rates. Google has released a statement which immediately praises the fact that the judge recognized how the advent of AI has changed the industry, and Google just loves that. They don't love having to share data with rivals, and they'll keep fighting on that, but OMG AI mentioned! While one giant monopoly is being legally forced to share, another has grown sick of your sharing and are wondering if you could please stop. Amazon is eliminating a program that allowed Prime members to share their free 2-day shipping with one person, even if they didn't share the same address. Now, Amazon is politely telling those non-Prime members to back off and get their own damn account, with an updated customer service page saying the Prime Invitee program will end October 1st. This announcement comes after Reuters reports that despite a big Prime Day push, Prime membership signups in the US did not meet last year's total or the company's target, which is to amass enough wealth to buy the moon. Now, instead of letting you share your Prime benefits with just anyone, Amazon will let you share your Prime benefits with up to one other adult, 4 children, and 4 teens who all live at the same residential address. Or as Amazon puts it, the address you consider to be your home and where you spend the majority of your time. So for me, this set, it's what they project me onto. I'm not real.
Still debated. Firefox just almost died is the title, but there is nothing about Firefox in. Am I blind? The only thing that mentions Firefox is Google can keep paying Mozilla and Apple. That doesn't speak about Firefox at all. Am I the only one that's like... No, fuck off. How many? So that's why the title is Firefox isn't there. I don't know. My experience is not that bad with Firefox. I actually love it. I don't recall anything that would not work because it's Firefox. Unless, you know, you have a site that is specifically like, oh, we support only Edge because people must live on Edge. What's this?
This is an Apple FireWire charger used for reviving dead iPods, and it has this thing here. It's a thing that comes out and allows you to plug different things into it, and I wanted to use this extension cable for it so that way it wouldn't be on the floor. And the problem is that this thing, see here, it's for a MacBook. These things are universally compatible. This is an ancient MacBook charger, and it would work in this one from like 2006 or the one that I have in my M1 MacBook Pro. The thing is, it's not quite the same. You see how there's two notches on one notch on the other?
I
So
see
means
that.
one
I saw that right away.
the MacBook won't fit in the FireWire, and I'm not sure exactly why they did this. It's an 8, while the other one makes not an 8. Sure, maybe I could Dremel out a little hole, or I could take a power cord from this Apple TV. You see how it's an 8?
Yeah. That's also something that crossed my mind, that there are other cords that are similar.
Right there, and it matches what's on the FireWire charger. So my question is, will the FireWire charger work when I plug the power cord from an Apple TV into it? So we'll take our Apple FireWire cable, plug it into the Apple FireWire charger, and then take an iPod, make sure it's the right
I really don't understand why Apple makes the chargers look so strange when they're in the wall socket.
way up because Apple 30 pin is not reversible, and it immediately started charging it. This is an Apple FireWire charger used for reviving.
Why goddamn twice?
I missed it the first time.
You didn't even drop your bombs. 11 planes were relying on you when clearly they shouldn't have.
And dropped 44,000 pounds of bombs on goddamn nothing.
We give you a $6,000 bomb sight, and apparently you don't want to look through it. Oh, and you lost your tail gunner. Nice fucking flying, soldier.
Do you have any idea how much each 500-pound bomb is worth?
I do not, sir.
Well, neither do I, but they don't grow on trees.
I took out the bridge, sir. The bridge is gone. That was the objective.
There's a goddamn thorn in our side, that bridge.
If we punish him, we'd be admitting something went wrong. That would be sending a message that the mission didn't go right.
We don't want that. The mission did go right.
Exactly. We could give him a medal.
What would we give him a goddamn medal for?
For going around twice.
I suppose it takes some courage to go around the target twice. And he did hit the target. And we'll make him a captain, too.
We need to do that.
Well, Lieutenant, you'll be pleased to know that we have made the decision to promote you to the rank of captain.
Okay.
Why goddamn twice?
Your job is poison taster.
Poison? I must be dreaming.
Can you explain to me why you have no one working under you? Just seems odd considering that the Agile board is showing that you have...
Anyway.
Speaking of dynamic visuals, Dolby has announced Dolby Vision 2. HDR formats don't usually get sequels, but I can give this a chance as long as it doesn't completely clown on the legacy of the legacy characters and then kill them. What were we talking about? Right, HDR. Dolby Vision 2 introduces content intelligence, an AI-enhanced feature.
Okay, let's go in one direction. Let's see what's this about. What VLANs do you actually need? Oh my god, does he have for every piece of equipment different VLAN? That would be crazy. Cloudflare.
VLANs are one of the best ways to segment your network, but for most home users, they quickly become overcomplicated.
Then just don't overcomplicate it. Easy. Management trustability plus. Using VLAN 1 or VLAN 0 is a little bit iffy, especially if it's for management. The first two are the segmentation I can understand. On the other hand, why bother? IoT definitely. Guest Sure, definitely. Now surveillance. I don't have any surveillance equipment yet. But I guess surveillance could be also in IoT chain. Development, depending on what you call development. Proximal cluster. Well, that's the question. Proximal cluster, is that trusted or is it not trusted? It's also like Proximus cluster. Does that mean that everything that is running on that Proximus cluster is in the same VLAN, or is it in the VLAN that is like, I don't know, development or trusted, depending on what VM it is? Internet, well, I guess you could have a VLAN for that. Not really sure why would you need that. Cloudflare, well, Cloudflare could be an IoT chain or guest chain, possibly. I don't know what's the last one, but let's
You
go.
don't need 10 different VLANs just to get started, and adding too much complexity can actually make your network harder to manage. In this video, I'll break down the few
He's not wrong.
VLANs that actually matter for a typical home setup, so you get the benefits of security and organization without turning your network into a headache. So to get started, the important thing to highlight is that there's not really a one-size-fits-all approach. So it's not like everyone should be following the same setup, but there are some general VLANs that you can start with and build on top of. But before we get to that, we should probably answer the question of why you'd even want to use VLANs in the first place. VLANs allow you to segment your network. Rather than having everything on one network where all of your devices would be able to communicate with each other, you can segment that network and group them into similar types of devices. Then you can utilize firewall rules to block access between those groups or VLANs. This improves security because you're able to ensure that some of your more untrusted devices that you'll probably have, like smart plugs, possibly security cameras, etc., cannot communicate with some of your more trusted devices where you're storing personal data, something like a NAS or a home server. In order to
You know, it's kind of funny catch-22 when it comes to like IoT or surveillance cameras, that if these devices require internet, you want to put them in a separate VLAN because there is a risk of compromise since it is embedded device and you don't always have a guarantee that it is bug free from the vendor or that vendor is doing security patching on a regular basis and it's following trends. But on the other hand, it's also a question like, how much data about you or your household does these items in those VLANs actually have? When we are talking about surveillance cameras, you know, GDPR comes into light, possibly. When it comes to variety of sensors and entire home assistant thing that possibly has, you know, if you enable it on your phone in the companion app or whatever we would call it, that one actually shares, for example, your location from the phone. Even if you, for example, configure your phone to not actually send the location data to Google to create a nice map of where you were last month, exactly each day, hour by hour. So yeah, it's like, are we putting, you know, like, what was it called? Airlocks in space, just, you know, within the same room inside an air, you have a padlock that is there to secure something, but it's not actually securing anything.
get there, though, you need to plan out your VLANs. And you don't want to get too specific, but you also don't want to be too broad. For example, if you have a bunch of smart home devices, you might want to create something like an IoT VLAN for all of those smart home devices. But you're probably not going to want to create separate VLANs for the type of smart home device. You should group them all into a general category.
Yeah, definitely. That would be, as he says, overcomplicating it. That's like really silly. But for me, for example, in the current setup that I have, it really depends on an angle because, for example, the PC that I'm streaming from, it's considered the VLAN that is like DMZ. Obviously, it does have access to, let's say, a storage. And that is kind of required. So, you know, there's a possible hole that you could see from that angle. But it is also like, you know, it's a gaming PC with Windows on it. Windows is like cheese full of holes, for one. For the other, it is also a problem of if it's a gaming PC, you're gonna install not just, useful apps and tools, you're gonna install also a lot of games from variety of developers. Obviously, same with OS or the apps that you are using. You do assume that all the developers are doing due diligence and patching their stuff and keeping up to date with everything. But the more stuff you install from variety of sources, you don't always have the assurance that everything that you install when it comes to games is actually following those principles, and you never know when something changes and suddenly it's more of a thread or data miner sending data from your PC out, which obviously can always happen. But yeah, for that reason, basically what I was trying to say is the gaming PC, whether that is Windows or Linux, would probably be thrown into a DMZ kind of a VLAN. And then when it comes to IoT devices and the entire Home Assistant, because it just cannot live without internet when it comes to updates. Let's skip the fact that you would have a Home Assistant and entire smart home in a way that it would not be depending on cloud services for whatever you use, whether that is a light bulb or a LED strip in your desk, right? Or some plug to a socket on a wall to control a device that is, plugged into that socket. Even if you do all that, still Home Assistant kind of depends on the internet. Not for the functionality of all the integrations and whatever you have in your smart home setup, but for all the updates. And that's the part that is a little bit pains me, because in that aspect, basically, I just have to put it in DMZ. Whether that DMZ is a separate VLAN called IoT or not is a little bit irrelevant. So for simplification, I could just say there is a VLAN that is basically for one of my mobile phones because it doesn't restrict internet in any way, shape, or form. It's also for the IoT stuff, and it's also for the gaming OS or a PC when it comes down to it. But of course, there are also things that are more sensitive or secure on that angle, and they are in different VLAN, and that different VLAN has different rules. And that's why the VLAN is more trusted, perhaps. So that's the way I have current setup. Also, I have a subnet that is split into, I think, 5 chunks. Around, I don't know, what is it, the number, 28, 29 IPs per one. So I have it split by, I think, /27. Yeah, I don't know. Something along those lines.
So with that in mind, let's start with some basic VLANs that almost everyone should have, and then start to build out for some of those more unique scenarios to customize.
Well, where are you?
Uptime 1 hour, 38 minutes, 43 seconds.
Your home network even further. So we're going to use a unified cloud gateway to display all this, but realistically, since we're creating VLANs, this will work for whatever you're using. We're going to start.
If you would start with this setup, whether you call this IoT or you call it DMZ, doesn't really matter.
Small here, and this is a typical home network that I think a lot of people will start with.
The important part is not whether stuff from DMZ can access something entrusted, like in my case, there is a gaming PC here, and here is a NAS. And obviously, I have a shared folder where I have whether that is app data, profiles from the browsers are saved there, saves from the games, or just, documents, downloads, and pictures, for example, yeah. And the reason it's there is because it makes making backups and snapshots that much easier, because it's automated automatically there for one, and for the other, if I power off the desktop, I still can access those files. I don't have to power on the desktop to access whatever is on local disk, whichever it is. Also, running low on space here. I have to sort out some other things.
And you'll have a trusted VLAN, an IoT VLAN, and a guest VLAN. So trusted. This is generally going to be for all of the devices that you own that contain personal data. So your cell phones, your PCs, possibly if you have a NAS, if you have any home servers, etc. The reason that you're doing that is generally...
Oh yeah, that reminds me. I could check some of these. This is subscribe. I don't know this one. Yeah, sure. What? Ah. I wonder what this is about. Okay, let's finish this.
Because you're utilizing those devices to access other trusted devices. So for example, if you have a smartphone and you have a NAS device and you have a Photos application on that NAS device, you're going to want to access that NAS device. And while technically you can put those servers or NAS devices on a separate VLAN, we want to try to group them into devices that we either trust or don't trust so that we can create firewall rules off of them. And that's where I said earlier, things can get very specific, but you really don't want to take them down that path. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very difficult to manage. So for a trusted VLAN, that will contain all of the devices that you trust. Next will be an IoT VLAN. Now, IoT VLANs are generally used for various different things depending on the person. I feel like almost everyone has an IoT VLAN, but very few of them are the same. So I'll give you what I have on my IoT VLAN, but theoretically it could be different for you. So for me, almost everything that I have from a smart home perspective, especially things that I don't trust, are on my IoT VLAN. That includes, but is not limited to, things like smart plugs, things like thermostats, things like smart TV hubs, just about any smart home device that is Wi-Fi oriented. And generally,
I mean, there is very easy solution. Just get the products that don't actually depend or need Wi-Fi to function, ideally, and switch to either Zigbee or Z-Wave. They might use the same frequency spectrum, but the tech is not about being network like internet. So if it's not on Wi-Fi, it doesn't require internet. It doesn't require vendor cloud-based solution. So that's a plus.
They all share something in common. They're all, in one way or another, linked to a category of devices that I need to access the internet. Overall, it's not super important if they can or cannot access each other, but they have to access the internet. I have to be able to access them from my trusted VLAN, but overall, way to group them and keep them isolated. That's my IoT VLAN. A lot of other people will have other things like security cameras and more, but we'll talk about that in a minute here. The next one would be a guest VLAN. This is an easy one. Generally, you don't want to add guests that access your network to your trusted or IoT VLAN. You would want them to access it utilizing their own VLAN, in this case, a guest VLAN. This allows you to ensure that they cannot access anything, and then you can even apply certain filters and stuff like that, depending on exactly what you want and what you want guests to be able to access. Now, from a subnet perspective, realistically, it doesn't really matter. Some people like to utilize 192.168.1 and just keep incrementing one, so 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Or you can use something totally different, like 10.5.0 or 10.5.1. It's kind of up to you. There's not a right or wrong. I would suggest you get off of the default, so 192.168.1. And in certain cases, for things like VPN servers, it can be a problem. But generally, I'm talking for the average home user, it's not something that you have to go crazy about, but wouldn't hurt to get off 192.168.1 or 192.168.0, which are both very common. Now, this network design right here is something that the majority of people would technically be able to implement and have a pretty segmented network with firewall rules. Obviously, you have to create firewall rules. I have a video that showcases exactly how to do that, but with firewall rules and these 3 VLANs here, you will technically be able to segment your network and improve security. But how can we build on top of this? The way that we can build on top of this is going to be dependent on exactly what you have on your network. So an example for me is going to be a surveillance VLAN. Now, this surveillance VLAN here is something that I create for my security cameras. So if you have security cameras, what I like to do is I like to group them into their own network. With that done, there are things that you can do. An example being that if you have cameras that are generally not trusted, they're a lot of the time not updated, you can ensure that they can't access the internet, stuff like that. So rather than going in and specifying individual firewall rules for individual devices.
Okay, so that's why you wanted it. Because originally I would be having an argument like, why not put surveillance cameras into IoT? Because they might require internet to be able to update itself, but yeah, IoTs could be also source of problems. But the thing is, like, you know, IoT is same kind of attack surface and same or similar kind of worms as the surveillance cameras that are either not updated regularly or updated irregularly and with very questionable updates.
Adding them on, let's say, an IoT VLAN and then blocking access that way, you group them all together into their own isolated VLAN where they cannot access any other devices based on the firewall rules, and then you create one blanket firewall rule that blocks access to the internet. Now, why is it important to segment them in the first place? For things like security cameras, if you're using Ubiquiti security cameras, I always say this to clients that I work with, Ubiquiti security cameras are updated. They're not posing the same security risk that something like other security cameras, I'm not going to name any brands, but something like other security cameras that are never updated are posing. So, for example, a lot of people get security cameras, they install that security camera, and then 7 years goes by and they have never been updated ever. If those devices are able to access the internet, if other devices on your network are able to access those devices, if they're able to access other devices, you could technically have a security gap there. That doesn't necessarily mean it will be exposed, but it could at some point be a problem. If at any point it could be a problem, it's better to segment it now. Don't wait until it becomes a problem, segment it now. Now, that's not to say that if you have something that's more trusted, like Ubiquiti cameras that are often updated, that you shouldn't.
The only issue I have with this, but in the end, it depends on what your firewall rules are defining. Even if you have surveillance cameras separate, and let's say someone manages to get onto those cameras, sure, they cannot, you know, walk in your network as much. But if it doesn't have unfiltered access to the internet, it can still do some damage, like start sending spam, join a botnet, and, you know, use your internet for whatever activity. And then you might end up with a problem on your hand. Just saying.
Isolate them. You can isolate them if you want. But the key here is that we're grouping them into a surveillance VLAN so that we can create firewall rules for this entire VLAN. They shouldn't have to access anything. The NVR should be able to access them, and you should be able to access the NVR. That's kind of how that works. Now, this setup right here is where you can start to take it one step further, but you are going to be adding complexity. Up to this point, all of these VLANs generally will be easy to manage, assuming that you have your firewall rules in place and they are correct. Now, we're going to start talking about things like a management VLAN and an isolated VLAN for external traffic, which we'll talk about in a second here. But I want to be clear that this is taking your setup one step further and adding some complexity to it. So I just added a management VLAN. Now, generally, a management VLAN is used for physical devices. So in the context of a unified network here, this is going to be your switches, your access points. Everything for your hardware itself would be on a management VLAN. This ensures that you could do one of two things. You could either limit traffic to those devices to, let's say, only your trusted VLAN, or you could even block it that way and say, you know what, nothing should ever be able to SSH into these devices. And for that reason, I'm going to block it right off the bat. Now, a management VLAN really generally depends on exactly what you have on your network. So for example, if you're somebody that has 10 different sets of devices, meaning 4 access points and 5 switches, etc., you're now veering into the category where you have a lot of hardware. A management VLAN might make sense. But if you're somebody that has like one switch, you might just want to add that to the trusted VLAN. So the trusted VLAN can include your hardware as well. It doesn't have to only be trusted devices. You can include your PC and your NAS and your home server network, that trusted VLAN. You can include this hardware as well. It's not necessary to create a management VLAN, but it does take it one step further. But it does complicate things. So I want to be clear. You have to really determine why you would want it in the first place. And then secondarily, you have to determine if it even makes sense to isolate those devices. If either of those concerns you, don't go crazy. You can put them in the trusted VLAN. You're probably going to be fine. Now, the next and final VLAN that we will talk about is an external VLAN. And generally, you don't want to do any port forwarding on your local network if you don't have to. There are a lot of people that will fight that comment, but if security is important to you, you should utilize a VPN, assuming that you can access your service utilizing a VPN. That's number one. Number two, there are a lot of people that want to port forward. And if you want to port forward, I'm not here to tell you not to, but I am here to say that you should isolate that into its own VLAN, possibly multiple VLANs. And this is where things can get very, very complicated depending on exactly what you want to do. So I have a video that showcases how to set up a Cloudflare tunnel. And the easiest way to kind of set that up is actually by putting that Cloudflare tunnel, that VM or Docker, whatever you're running it with, putting that on its own VLAN, and then poking holes using firewall rules into your other VLANs so that it can only access those specific services without being able to access everything. If that doesn't make any sense to you and you're interested in it, I will leave a pop-up to a video now. But the reason why you at minimum everything, if that doesn't make any sense to you and you're interested in it, I will leave a
Then in the middle. Why would you call it like that? I mean, it's not entirely wrong.
pop up to a video now. But the reason why you at minimum need to isolate your traffic is because if in any way you are port forwarding something, you are exposing that device to the world. Now, with firewall rules, your goal is to limit that traffic. So it's not necessarily the case that you're exposing it to the entire world. It could be a subset of IPs. It could be a country. It could be multiple countries. But only you will know exactly what technically can access that device. But regardless, if you have an external VLAN, you can call it whatever you want. What you're saying is that, God forbid, that device in any way is compromised. If it starts to probe other devices on your local network, it will only access whatever is on that external VLAN. And using Ubiquiti's zone-based firewall, they even have a DMZ zone in here, which basically allow you to just put it in here and ensure that it's isolated from everything. Now, the important part here is that if you're somebody that will be port forwarding, you should have either one or multiple VLANs for those systems. It really depends on the requirements. However, for the average person, if you're not port forwarding anything, which generally I would say that you probably shouldn't, but if you're not port forwarding anything, then you...
So here's a question. And that's probably $1 billion question. Maybe not billion. Let's say you want to run Cloudflare. Do you really need to define it as an extra VLAN on your network if all you're gonna do is put it in a Docker container and next to it in the same network on that specific Docker system, you will have all the services that you want to be accessible externally and internally as well, basically. But that Cloudflare will be basically part only of that Docker network, internal network, and not be able to access anything outside that Docker network. Do you actually need the VLAN? Because I think you don't.
You don't need this. Now, the final thing I want to talk about is devices that don't fall into a category. So this happens a lot more often than you'd think. Something like a printer. Where are you going to put it? Are you going to put it on your trusted VLAN because that's a device that you trust? Are you going to put it on your IoT VLAN because you don't trust it? It depends. There's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. You kind of want to look...
Yeah, it's all right.
Look at it from a security perspective. And you want to say, is there any scenario where the printer should have to access your trusted devices? For most people, it's not going to be the case. You would want your trusted devices to be able to access the printer, but not necessarily the printer to be able to access the trusted devices. And that little information, as silly as it sounds, is really what you need to determine what VLAN it should be a part of. So if it should communicate...
Still, you know, in the end, it's also, you know, like, what are you printing on your printer? Do you print something that potentially GDPR, like your personal information is in there when you, I don't know, print a sheet of paper that contains your flight ticket and your number, your ID of the passport or ID of the ID card? Sure, it's like... maybe I'm a little bit going excessive with this, and you would not be wrong. But it's also like, if someone would breach your printer and not do anything and just collect the information about what kind of network is this, because I cannot, you know, breach anything else. Eventually they might learn like, okay, someone that lives there has this name, so where do they live? For example, they might try to search on the internet. Maybe they will find the address. Where is it? Who knows? You know, and eventually they could try some social engineering if they know your name, first, last name, your date of birth, and stuff like that.
With other devices, then you would put it on, let's say, a trusted VLAN. But if it should not, that's when you get into a situation of where should it go? For a lot of people,
in the end, all that matters is if you configure your VLANs and your firewall rules, that it should inform you when something goes wrong. Like, I don't know, if printer suddenly starts doing a port scanning of the entire network, or if it starts pinging or trying to connect to random ports on a router, that doesn't make sense because it was never instructed to do that in past, and it never did, even without an instruction, and now suddenly it starts doing that. So you could use that information as something is going wrong with the printer, for example.
IoT VLAN becomes the catch-all bucket. If you don't know where it goes into the IoT network. I'm not saying that that's right, just saying that that's what happens a lot. So that's the way I would approach devices that don't fall into a category. Now you're going to run into other problems. I've worked with clients that have Sonos devices, and Sonos is, I don't have one, but supposedly very specific on how it communicates with each other and how it communicates with the device that is trying to connect to that. It's not always the easiest to get those devices to communicate with one another. And in situations like that, it's kind of hard. You're going to have to make a sacrifice in some way. The sacrifice would be either lowering security and saying those Sonos devices are going to be on the same VLAN as my trusted device so that I could stream back and forth, or I'm going to create a completely separate VLAN for the Sonos devices. I'm going to assign that VLAN to a Wi-Fi network. I'm going to connect to that Wi-Fi network whenever I want to access those devices, but generally, I'm not going to be able to access them because I will generally be on the trusted VLAN and that will be on the Sonos VLAN. So VLANs in general are going to be highly, highly, highly specific based on your individual hardware. If you don't have a Sonos system, that's not even on your radar. But if you do have a Sonos system, most likely you're going to be in this situation. You have to figure out how you want to handle it. So the overall key is that while we went over today 6 different VLANs, the majority of people should probably have 3. If you have cameras, you might want 4. Anything more than 4 is when things start to get difficult to manage. And you can trust me because I have a lot of them. They are all needed for what I do, but I'm in a very unique situation. I'm running this entire channel here. So there's a lot of stuff that I have to test, etc. So I have a lot more VLANs than the average person. But the point remains that the more VLANs you have, the harder it is to manage. And overall, you want to keep managing.
The reason I have this many VLANs is because I did split my subnet into chunks of the same sizes. And how full those chunks will be eventually determines if I change that at some point.
At the forefront when you're a home user. So I know this was a lot. Obviously, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to leave those in the comments. But other than that, if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.
Object-oriented networking? What the heck? Let's see. What is this?
Have you ever seen a coworker ignore warnings until...
Okay. Let's see.
Fire. Dude, hey man, no need to come inside, bro. I just need one of those O2 bottles you got. Yeah, that's not the way this works, dude. Come on, man. Listen, my buddy's O2 supply is running a little bit low, but he doesn't want to go down to the hospital. So just give him one of yours, and then you can be on your way. Okay, I'm fine. No, you're not. You're blue. Blue is his favorite color. Cyan to be specific. Well, you look cyanotic, and you're gonna die if we don't get you down to the hospital. No, they won't let me smoke when I'm admitted. You know where you're also not gonna be able to smoke a cigarette? Where? In a coffin.
Damn it! I should have said that ahead of time. I would have won that bet. Damn it.
Good point. Let's go. Fire. Dude, hey man, no need to come inside, bro. I just need one of those O2 bottles you got. Yeah, that's not the way this works, dude.
Hilarious.
Come on, man.
Everything is gone.
Okay. He was just lazy and dumb until... Okay.
May I sit here, warrant officer?
Do whatever you feel like doing, warrant officer Shamil. I don't own the desk or the chair, so have a seat.
Wait, did he say... What did he say? Did he say I don't know or I don't own?
I don't own the desk or the chair,
Okay.
so have a seat.
Morning. Welcome to the Elementary Tactics Lecture. Now, we will begin with Chapter 2, Section 4 on the Japonic War. A performance by its low-ranked officers. Warrant Officer Shamil?
It's page 132.
The Battle of Abelia.
That is correct. And now, please explain why this battle was historically significant. You, Officer Solork?
Commanding officer on the Imperial side was Captain Giorgio. He and the rest of the 800 men in his independent battalion were marching alone in Abelia. They were then surrounded in the wetlands by 3 corps of about 1,600 Japonic soldiers and were on the brink of annihilation. We must picture the units moving in real time, as if we're playing a game of chess while blindfolded. Now I'm done.
I don't think I saw that one. I mean anime itself.
Otto, we got a Porsche for deliveries. Want to see it?
A Porsche?
Porsche.
So that's a Porsche.
Yep, none of our delivery orders are that far, so we ride this. You don't gotta worry about parking tickets or gas.
So this is the company car. This really is just an ordinary job. The delivery is officially complete.
What? You're kidding. That trip takes me 40 minutes round trip on the bike.
It's only been 20 minutes.
I know.
Oh, really? It usually takes y'all twice as long?
So what, were you pedaling real hard?
No, don't think so.
Wow, he doesn't look sweaty at all.
What do you think? Should I call to see if it got delivered?
Well, it's not like I don't believe you. It is your first one, so we'll call the client and we can double check.
Hey, boss. They said he delivered it, then stayed for coffee and took off.
What?
Now that's a real ex-delivery driver, a true professional.
Yeah, well, I am a pro.
Sato, we got a Porsche for deliveries. Want to see it?
A Porsche?
Porsche.
So that's a Porsche.
Yep, none of our delivery orders are that far, so we ride this. You don't gotta worry about parking tickets or gas.
So this is...
Well, the boss has a point. No gas problems, no ticket. And no broken cars. So I did grab an ice cream from the freezer, and this was awkward. How should I say this? Usually it didn't fall off the stick to me, okay? Usually I was able to just enjoy my naruk, or ice cream if you will. But this time I guess they made a mistake at the production and the stick was probably not in the center, so it fell. Now I have a little piece of ice cream on my tit and then it fell on the desk, so shoot. But yeah, I already picked it up and put it somewhere else.
The company car. This really is just an ordinary job. The delivery is officially complete.
What? You're kidding. That trip takes me 40 minutes round trip on the bike.
It's only been 20 minutes.
I know.
Oh, really? It usually takes y'all twice as long?
So what, were you pedaling real hard?
No, don't think so.
Wow, he doesn't look sweaty at all.
What do you think? Should I call to see if it got delivered?
Well, it's not like I don't believe you. It is your first one, so we'll call the client and we can double check.
Hey, boss. They said he delivered it, then stayed for coffee and took off.
What?
Now that's a real ex-delivery driver, a true professional.
Yeah, well...
Have you ever seen a coworker?
I don't recall even that one. Let's see what this one is about.
I spent months designing what I thought was the perfect Power over Ethernet smart home room sensor.
Okay, yes, there is no problem with batteries. That part I can understand, that there's no problem with signal. But anyway.
And many of you said you wanted one. But there's a problem. I might not be able to sell it at all. In today's video, I'll explain why and give you a complete update on the project. I studied industrial electronics. I know that designing and producing a product is no easy task. There are tons of regulations you must follow to bring an electronic product to the market. And it makes sense. To ensure these products don't harm anyone or interfere.
Didn't I mute the... my apologies.
With each other. In the European Union, there is something called the CE marking. Everyone selling products in the European Union must place this mark on their product and sign a declaration of compliance, listing all the applicable norms and declaring you comply with the rules. Here's the crazy part. You actually have to buy these standards. You can't just look them up, and they're not cheap. Hundreds of euros each, and there are many. How can they force me to follow rules but charge me for access to them? It definitely favors big companies over small ones. Anyway, once you know the rules, you design your product accordingly. A lot of these rules require testing and measurements with very expensive equipment in very expensive specialized chambers. These anechoic chambers in accredited labs provide the controlled environment needed for tests like RF emission measurements. I agree, these rules and measurements are important, but booking these chambers costs thousands of euros. Alright, but now we have a product that hopefully passes all tests. No. Of course your product will initially fail. You will have to redesign parts and retest. EMC is black magic. Even with careful design, failure is likely. But after spending all that time and money, you'll eventually have a product that follows all the rules and can be legally sold in the European Union at least. Because other parts of the world have different rules you'll need to comply with too. But let's focus on the European Union first. After all, this is where I live, and according to my surveys, this is where most of the potential customers are located. Have I thanked you enough for participating in those surveys? Seriously, thank you. I feel honored. So far, 285 people have signed up and told me exactly which features they need, with 357 total signups. That should be enough demand to justify the risk of starting production. Or so I thought. Let's continue. To sell products, I need an online shop. And these are heavily regulated too. You need to be extremely careful about what you do and how you do.
Is he gonna mention a possibility of selling on eBay or some other site that offers this possibility?
But I'm already paying a lawyer to help me with legal texts, privacy policy, cancellation policy, terms and conditions. It turns out most companies don't write these to annoy you, but protect themselves from legal action. Screwing this up can easily bankrupt you. Alright, so we have a web shop. Let's sell the product, right? Wrong. Did you notice that every product comes with instructions in tons of different languages? Even if all my customers speak English and I have perfect guides online, I still need to translate them into every official language of each member state where I ship. Most people will throw them away immediately, but fine. Can I finally sell the product now? Yes, but it comes with...
Wait, can you actually... do you actually need to provide a printed manual in that language? Because most appliances these days, the only thing that they come with is quick start guide and maybe a QR code to an application, or a QR code that just lets you download a PDF that actually contains the entire manual that has, I don't know, 100 pages or something in all those languages. But they don't have to they don't have to include a printed version of that in the box. They only give you, like, you know, warranty card and quick starter guide. And if you want to go into instruction manual and what's not, you can still do that, but it's not in paper form. Everywhere.
Risks. Even if I follow all norms and guidelines perfectly, I should protect myself with insurance and also create a limited company. So I hopefully don't lose my house if, say, a big corporation decides to sue me for whatever reason, maybe rightfully so or not. This will cost thousands more euros up front, plus ongoing annual costs to maintain these legal structures, but fine. Alright, we're safe now. Let's sell the product. Well, first we need to actually produce it, so I'll pay for the initial batch production after making absolutely sure there is nothing wrong with the production files and the quality control and the testing are in place. Because the worst case in this scenario is I pay for
Uptime 2 hours 9 minutes 34 seconds.
the disposal of expensive garbage and start over. Speaking of disposal, did you notice some products have this cross-out trash bin symbol. That's the WEEE label, Waste Electrical and Electronics Equipment Directive. If you sell products in the European Union, you must put this label on your product. It's pretty ugly, but fine. After all, it's good to remind people not to throw electronics into the regular waste. We would waste valuable recyclable materials. In the European Union, every company selling electronics is legally required to pay for recycling their products. Fair enough, I guess. It shouldn't be too expensive to recycle the relatively small amounts of PCBs I ship to customers. Wrong. This is where the video ends, because I couldn't find a feasible solution to this problem. Let me explain. Looking at this list, you see my sensors would ship all over Europe. A few sensors here, a few sensors there. Should be simple, right? But it's not, because I'd have to pay for recycling in every country I ship to. Fine, how much would it cost to recycle a few boards I plan to ship to every country? It turns out, besides a small fee per product, there is a minimum payment required in most countries. And these minimums are in the hundreds of euros every year. So I send a handful of sensors to a country and have to pay hundreds of euros for the privilege of selling my sensors there. And the best part? The same applies to packaging. Again, I'd pay hundreds of euros every year for the privilege of shipping products to each country. I agree that producers should pay for recycling, but this is insane. It's completely unfair. I'd have to sell my sensors for an unreasonable price.
Question. Does all these fees apply for each product, or if you are as a company paying for that waste disposal or recycling of the product? Is that per company or per product? Meaning that if you make more products, you can possibly, you know, distribute the cost of those fees. I don't know. Just thinking. Never actually had anything to sell to anyone as a product.
Just to avoid losing money on each sale. And I haven't even told you the whole story yet. These regulations come with a ton of overhead. You need to document and report all sorts of things. This creates plenty of jobs at big companies, but hits small businesses hard. So to sum it up, it makes absolutely no financial sense to proceed this way. But this isn't the end of the project. It works great. It's already making our house smarter and more energy efficient.
So what, instead of a product, you would just sell the PCB made in bulk with the parts, so that people that want it will just solder the parts on the PCB and use their 3D printer, if they have one, to print the case and assemble it. Because then you're not selling the product, yeah, because it's not a product. It's just parts that people have to assemble first, and then it's product. I don't know. Just thinking out loud.
And I'm convinced it will bring real value to many people out there. I'm not giving up. I have some ideas for how to continue, and I'll be evaluating them carefully. But I really need your help. If you have ideas, contacts, or even just encouragement, please leave a comment or email me. Let's figure this out together. If you would like to learn more about the sensor, please check out my playlist. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.
Okay.
I hope you're having a lovely day. Today I want to follow up on a video that I did 2 years ago on how the EU seems to be trying their best to ruin the internet. It's something that confuses me a lot as an American, because when I look at it, whether or not we always agree on every single issue, the EU seems to at least try to care about protecting things like privacy. With the GDPR, when it comes to consumer rights, you want companies to offer real warranties, not that 3 to 9.
Another thing that was, oh, GDPR. I'm not sure if all the sides are actually good, but when it comes to Type-C USB port and forcing Apple to, you know, switch to Type-C instead of their amazing and silly Lightning port. You know, we are getting to a point that, you know, you can use Type-C to charge your laptop, to charge your phone, to charge in future, or if that future is already here, I don't know. I don't use Apple devices and Apple products. You can use your your iPhone with the same connector, and possibly many other gadgets are switching to that port for charging.
Month bullshit where the product can die on month 11 and you're screwed. And when a company does something wrong in the EU, you find them a real amount of money. You don't play that shit of 0.02% of their yearly profit when they have sold data to bail bondsmen and bounty hunters and advertisers. You want companies to be held accountable and responsible, the same way that I want telemarketers to be held accountable and responsible. This is why I'm really confused by what you guys are doing with this chat control bill. So this is something that I went over in summer of 2023. This was one of my most famous videos for this gaffe that I made where I said, oh my God, who voted for you? And somebody said, how she got elected? Lewis, do we have news for you? We're referring to an EU commissioner that was suggesting that you could sniff encrypted communications. This is from an interview. Molvad put this on their blog. It's about sniffing, checking out, you could say. It's not as if you could read the communication. I mean, it's like a police dog being able to smell if there's something there. And Molvad says it's not possible to sniff end-to-end encrypted communication without looking at the encrypted communication. They want this chat control thing to get pushed through because it's supposed to protect the children, it's supposed to protect against grooming, it's supposed to find CSAM, which is child abuse material. Yeah, let's get rid of privacy altogether. This is in the context of messaging apps. So we're talking about Signal, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, stuff like that. They want to make sure that no CSAM, no child abuse material, no sort of grooming is going on. But how do you do that? The way that you do that is by detecting those types of messages. How do you detect those types of messages? Either A,
various apps and platforms already have some controls or ways to either, you know, ensure that people that are underage don't go on those platforms, or they have some, you know, toggles or controls that should help that. So I'm not entirely understanding why EU is getting involved in this. On the other side of things, yes, those people doing these things might be migrating from platform to a different platform, and that's why EU is interested. But why does this sound like, you know, it's overreaching? Why is it about having that for everyone? And as we later find out, except politicians. What if you are a whistleblower? You don't have that freedom? You are not excluded from this? Anyway, we should first watch the video and then I should probably talk about this. But if this is meant to protect children, why not have it only on the devices that are undeniably a phone that is used by a children? Yeah, by a kid, basically. Because, you know, if you are a parent and you give a phone to your kid so that you can reach that kid and wherever they are, and message them and what's not, odds are you might have added them in their Google account if they are using Android into your account, and you did find that they are a child. So there is already a way that, you know, if it is somewhere easily exported variable that just would tell all the apps on that phone that, hey, this is a child phone, then sure, by all means, control the chat messages. But why is it like, anyway?
You decrypt them, or B, you read them before they're encrypted. Either way, that completely fucking defeats the purpose of what Signal does. Signal is there so that when I send a message to my friend, the only person who's reading the message is myself and my friend. And maybe a reporter.
Hello.
At the Atlantic if you work for the White House, but I'm sorry, I can't help myself. But the whole point of this is privacy. Like, that's the entire point. You are removing that if you want to have a dog sniffing the communications next to us. When I go to the airport and there's a dog there, that dog is employed by the TSA or the police. So what you're suggesting is that when I'm sitting in my own house and I'm having a conversation with my friend who's also sitting on their own house, which they paid for, that we should have the police right next to us, that there should be a policeman next to me every fucking place that I go. I send text messages when I'm on vacation, I send text messages on the beach, I send text messages when I'm at work, I send text messages in my house, I send text messages when I'm exploring and I'm going to Diana's Baths in New Hampshire. So what you're suggesting is that the police be next to me everywhere that I go when I communicate for the rest of my life. That's a bullshit analogy. And even if you take it as a real real analogy that actually makes it worse. Let's go through this and let's just go through why this is a horrible fucking idea. And this is where I ask all you guys in the EU, what the fuck are you doing? Firstly, when you look at the actual numbers, about 10% of these were false positives immediately. So 10% of what gets submitted is just not child abuse material. About 20% were marked as child abuse material, and the rest of it was just a bunch of random bullshit that was never actually acted on. If you were to create some method of scanning what people do with their end-to-end encrypted communications, what you're going to do at that point is you're going to overrun law enforcement agencies to the point where they can't respond to anything. How many people does the EU have? Like 440, 450 million people? You're going to scan the communications of every single one of these people. One of the ways that they propose doing this is using AI. Suitable technology for recognizing known CSAM or hash values in photo DNA. For new CSAM and grooming, AI...
Asmon. Asmon. He sometimes has good opinions, but I don't like on Asmon the fact that he's looking for drama and just following news. So on a degree I like his content, on a degree I don't like what he's doing when he's streaming. But yeah, it's interesting. I didn't actually recognize that it is actually Asmon in that email.
Is used, similar to the technologies used for recognizing spam and virus content. So you are going to use AI to figure out whether or not something that I sent or a message I sent is that type of material. There's a great post on Reddit that I have to highlight from Risen8. Think about chats like Counter-Strike, like where to put a bomb, or with some OS-related queries. How to kill a child when its parent no longer runs. If you are not a Linux systems administrator...
How to kill a child when its parent is no longer runs? What? This is like broken English a little bit in that sentence.
You probably think that that's something nobody should ever say. If you're a Linux systems administrator, that's probably just run-of-the-mill talk for you. I use AI for...
That's what it was about, okay.
A lot of different things. A lot of the times it's very useful, but also a lot of the times it gives me really stupid shit. And
okay, in the context of Linux and talking about processes, yes, that makes sense. But if you're thinking like relationship between people, then it sounds like broken English.
if that is going to be what is trusted with sending my personal private communications to law enforcement, get the fuck out of here with that shit. Let's just put aside the fact that that's not even going to work based on the numbers alone. You're going to overload the police with so much shit they're just not going to be able to go through any of this to begin with. Look at what...
Yeah, that is also true. No, it's a possible risk. It's not true. It's possible risk, yes. But you just have to have the AI get better at this.
You're giving up in order to do that. How far are you...
So that there are no false positives.
...willing to go to do this whole protect the children thing? There are kids that get hit in parking lots by cars. Kids get hit by cars all the time. Let's just get rid of cars. Let's get rid of roads. Hell, let's not let them go
valid points.
Outside, because if you don't let the kids go outside until they're 18, there's no chance of them getting hurt. I'm being dead serious. Your proposal is to have a fucking Bonzi buddy sitting...
Actually, not entirely can agree with Luz on this one, because sure, if kids don't go outside, then, you know, physical harm is possibly ruled out, like he said, hit by a car or something. But if they stay in the house, and let's say that they can go to school remotely, they are still possibly exposed to access to the internet, and who knows what they will do on the internet and what platforms they access, and then, you know, you're still back at what this is trying to protect them from.
Next to me, reading every single fucking thing that I say and reporting it to the police to figure out whether or not I'm a child abuser to protect kids? That's insane. One of my personal favorites going through this law and its proposals when I read through the actual source text, rules for thee, but not for me. Section 12A or recital 12A, I forget, they have all these different weird names for shit.
That's the reason why they want to put it on all the phones and not just the phones of the kids. Because if you only see the message on the receiving end, you have harder time to actually catch the person that sent that message. Okay.
In light of the more limited risk for their abuse of the purpose of child sexual abuse and for the need to preserve confidential information, including classified information, information covered by professional secrecy and trade secrets, electronic communication services that are not publicly available, such as those used for national security purposes, should be excluded from the scope of this regulation.
So how are they actually planning to do that? Because I heard an opinion that says that politicians would be excluded. By this sentence that he just read, it's like, I don't know, if you are a defense contractor for the government, does all your company phones actually fall into 12A? That it should be excluded because you're discussing government defense contracts with other government officials. Anyway.
Accordingly, this regulation should not apply to the interpersonal communication services that are not available to the general public, and the use of which is generally restricted to persons involved in the activities of that particular company, organization, body, or authority. The people that govern you are not going to have their personal communication spied on and sent to fucking BonziBuddy to figure out if it is abuse.
You know, it's funny that if they are saying that this is the rules, then I have a question for you. Quite a few years ago, there was this problem with, like, I don't know, what is the term for this? Hold up. Oh no. The term is, yeah, when, for example, some priest in some church was, you know, grooming children or something like that. And let's say by this logic, possibly those people should be also excluded because, you know, there might be people that are telling them secrets about their life or what they did wrong in order to, you know, get the redemption or whatever, right? But those were the sources of problem at some point in time. And same can happen with politicians. They might also be like a politician that is like, anyway.
But yours are. All options focus
I don't even want to think about it.
on the objective of ensuring detection, removal, and reporting of previously known and brand new CSAM and grooming by relevant online service providers established in the EU and the third countries insofar as they offer their services in the Union. So why is this important? Well, lots of methods that are used right now are going through databases of known CSAM and saying, okay, does this image, does this video match something that is in a database of stuff that is known to be child abuse material? That's one thing, because it's not looking for the shit that you say, it's looking for a very specific hash of a specific file. Here, it's trying to find new stuff, which means that it's not just doing a dumb determination of, does this picture match the hash of a known thing of child pornography? It's doing a, let me think to myself and figure out if this is child pornography. And those are two very fucking different things. To be clear, I don't want my device being scanned by any of these fucks for any of these things or any of my messages, but it's much more dangerous when you're going to have some sort of algorithm or AI try to figure out if what I am doing is that. Again, that's where you get into the question of when somebody says something like, how to kill a child when its parent no longer runs. How many times have you asked AI in that question and gotten a stupid answer? How many of you want to get reported to the police based on that BonziBuddy giving you a stupid answer? The thing...
I feel better that I never asked the AI this question. Or did this type of question. That's... I also like that in the background, behind his cat, there are actually books or something that is called Black Mirror, which is TV series.
That makes me sad about this is the fact that this most likely will go through, and there's probably nothing you can do about it. So I had hired somebody a few months ago for a temporary position who's what I would consider a quote normie to do kind of more public relations type of stuff, try to get the issues that I talk about here featured in the normal media. I already have an engaged audience of 2 million people. I'm speaking to the choir, but I wanted to figure out how to speak to others. And this was a communications chain back and forth with this employee at one point in time. I was told that Signal is the sus WhatsApp. Like anyone that doesn't want anyone to know what they're speaking to because they're having sus relations, they use Signal. He doesn't have to know types. You know what I mean. So my response was as follows. AT&T has been selling its customers' location data to creditors, bounty hunters, landlords, prison officials, and all sorts of third parties, and then I followed up with all of the documents. AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon collected user data and sold it to advertisers, bounty hunters, and bail bondsmen. When this came to light during an FCC investigation, AT&T was fined a dollar amount that was 0.02% of their net profit for a year. This is akin to me stealing the text conversations you have with your boyfriend and selling it to Jerry Springer and getting a $20 fine. Response: this is nuts and infuriating. Why is there no rule passed against this? I said there is a rule. That's why they were fined $57 million. That's 0.02% of AT&T's yearly net profit. Horrible. And this comes back to a theme I talk about on my channel all the time, which is we spend so much time beating each other up that we don't spend time focusing on the people who are actually screwing us. The people that are selling our data to bail bondsmen that get bullshit fines for it and continue to do it over and over again. She was very, very aggravated when she sent that message of like, how is this a thing? Well, how is there not a rule against this? And another answer I could have given in that moment is when people like us who are privacy advocates say that's wrong, you say that we're sus. We spend too much time beating each other up rather than focusing on the people who are actually screwing us. And as
Wow.
long as that happens, whether it's in the EU or the US or anywhere else about any topic, we're not going to get real change. If you want your government to install a BonziBuddy next to you and a little doggy that follows you every fucking place that you go, like that metalhead episode of Black Mirror, be my guest. But I don't want it to be that way, which is why I try to foster...
I like how you mentioned Black Mirror. I never actually watched Black Mirror myself, but I did see some snippets, whether that was on YouTube or... I have a general idea of what Black Mirror is about. Hey.
To a world where we're not beating the shit out of each other, but rather working together for collective change. Because this is the default thought process for most people. You want privacy? You must be dangerous. Another experience that I had...
Of course, the classic.
funny. This dates back a long time ago on a dating app. I was having a conversation with somebody. It was actually going really, really well. At some point I said, hey, here's my number. I'm on Signal. If you want to take a walk downtown sometime, I'd love to talk more. And she sent something back that was like this paragraph-long lecture of, okay, so a man wants to speak to me on a highly encrypted messaging app that I have never met and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yes, I don't want AT&T and T-Mobile fucking selling my text message data and my location and everything without my consent. And what I've learned over and over again is that we're the psychos. We're the crazy people. Because I don't want AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile selling my data to fucking advertisers, bounty hunters, and bail bondsmen, I'm crazy. Because I believe the only person who should be reading my messages are myself and the person I send it to, I'm crazy. I've learned that this is not only a thing in the EU, it is a thing around the world.
I haven't met a person like that yet that would be thinking that. And fair point is also that I don't actually talk to many people or try to socialize a lot. So yeah, I guess that's not an argument on my end. Moving on.
World. I'm the crazy one. And if you're watching this, you're likely the crazy one too. I don't like being pessimistic about things, but this has been a conversation that's been going on for 2 years with chat control at the very least. I think it was originally proposed in 2022. You had that ridiculous conversation where she said, we don't want to read your messages. We just want to sniff it like a dog at the airport in 2023. Yet it's still a proposal that's being taken seriously. And it's about a month and a half to 2 months away from being enforced.
Please tell me that the person that uttered that sentence is no longer in European Parliament. Please, please, please.
And when you take a look at who's for the proposal and who's against the proposal, you're massively outnumbered. 3 member states opposing, 15 member states supporting, 9 member states.
Oh, when was the video? 2 weeks ago? The numbers changed a little bit since then. Maybe put that up. Maybe this one. 6, 15, and 6. Well, didn't change that much. Which ones are undecided? Germany is undecided. Greece, Slovenia, Romania. Wait, so this basically doesn't say that it is confirmed that everyone from our country is opposing it, per se. Oh, it's just the general. Okay, that's interesting. August. Okay, so let's see this one supports. No way. Well, doesn't surprise me, but oh, they actually have 2 people that are opposing it. And everyone else is assumed by default that they support it because the government supports it. Okay. Diplomatic bodies. Interesting. Is there a way to see like not the member state positions but those MAP? Is that what it's called? Where is this representative in European Parliament called? Brussels office, Strasbourg office. Social. Ooh. Okay.
It's undecided. So even if every single member state that's undecided opposes it, it's still 15 to 12. So this is a website called fightchatcontrol.eu. It's a very well organized website. It tells you how to find your representatives, it tells you how to take action, and it informs you on everything. And it has a lot of really, really good citations and sources if you want to find material. What I would suggest that you do if you live in the EU is you go through this website immediately. And if you want to live in a world where you have privacy, then you should care about this. And if you think that I'm being ridiculous, then show me your phone. No, see, I want to see all your messages right now. Because what I did is I responded to my employee here poorly. I also responded to the person on that dating app very poorly. The right thing to say in that instance is give me your phone so I can read your messages. That's the only right way to go about this. Let me look through your phone right now. I want to see your emails. I want to see your messages. I want to see all of your interpersonal communications. Oh, you don't want me seeing them? Are you doing something wrong? That's the only way to get people to understand. The moment anybody makes you feel weird about this, the moment anybody implies that you are a creep or a weirdo or a conspiracy theory or a tinfoil hat or whatever because you want to have end-to-end encrypted communications that are not read by something, look them straight in the eye and ask for the password to their computer and phone and demand that they put it in front of you right now. Don't be a wise-ass Lewis. I'm just you that I don't want to see my conversations, but I'm okay with the government seeing it. All right, cool. Let's go down the street. The sheriff's office is right down the road. How about you control P and you print down to 350 pages of conversations that you've had with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, and why don't you just leave it on the table over there and tell them that they could read through it at any time? Oh, you're opposed to that. Yes? Why? Because they don't need to have. Exactly. They don't need to know. That's privacy. That's how you get people to get it. And if you don't get people to get it sooner, then you're never going to have it later. Because they're 2 months away from installing
I need to remember this. This is a very useful angle.
a minority report level Bonzi buddy next to you everywhere you fucking go and speak. You do something now, or you're fucked. There's no way else I can put it. Honestly, yeah, I'm probably going to be provocative in the title of this video. I think that the EU is worse than the United States when it comes to privacy. I don't give a fuck about the GDPR. It's one thing for a company to be able to do this shit. It's another when it's the government doing it. At the very least, if I wanted to live in the fucking woods somewhere and not use Facebook or Instagram or Google or ever join a forum, I could. Even in the EU, if I did all that shit, if I went into a hut in the woods and I used Signal on my phone, you'd still be reading my shit. Until you fix this, the EU is actually worse than the US when it comes to privacy. Fight me. I'll defend that take. Yes. What's the point? I've wasted so much of my life clicking decline on cookie notices when I used to just be able to decline cookies in a separate web browser that I used for when I wasn't logging into websites. All this time that was wasted over this for nothing.
Yeah, I feel his pain, and I agree with that pain. It's really stupid and silly.
Nothing. You're worse than the US. That's fucking shameful. You should not be behind the US in consumer rights or privacy ever. Go to that website and figure out what the fuck you need to do. Figure out who your representatives are and raise some hell. And don't do this, Lewis. I don't know. No, fuck that shit. Even in the video I did on turning a profile picture into a Clippy, you have no idea how many emails I got going, Lewis, where do I find the profile picture? Where do I find Clippy? Where do you change it? And it's like, how the fuck do you people even get up in the morning? I swear to Christ, sometimes.
I wonder if those were actually trolls or just people that were genuinely like unaware how to do that.
I think that, no, just, it's too important. Figure it out and get together. I'm not in the EU. I don't vote there. I don't live there. I don't work there. I can't help you any more than I am right now. I could bring this issue to your attention, and I could suggest that you bring it to the attention of your neighbors and elected officials. And unelected officials, because apparently they're the ones that make your laws for you.
Wait, what was that comment?
Attention, and I could suggest that you bring it to the attention of your neighbors and elected officials. And unelected officials, because
How she got elected, Luis?
apparently they're the ones that make your laws for you. But do something. Because if you don't do something there, this shit's going to spread over here. If our government sees that you got away with it, then we're fucked too. Or it could be the opposite, actually, because a lot of our government looks at what the EU...
Yeah, and lots of things in EU or other either countries or then what is the word? Let's say other parts of the world might get inspired by whatever shit is flying in the US. Whether that is what appears to be to me as a clown show with Trump there and the changes that he was introducing in the beginning of his second election, I think. I don't know if it's still as wild as it was 1 or 2 years ago, but yeah, that was crazy.
He was doing, and they're like,
EU's stifling standards concerning the internet is what killed tech in Europe. How harmful would it be to winning the race for AI if America goes down the road of the EU?
This could actually be a good thing for us. Because if you do this, maybe our government will do the exact opposite to say, look, we're not like the socialist EU. Maybe this could be a good thing. I try to find the positive in things when I feel like...
Luis, tell me, you don't really believe that, do you?
I'm hopelessly fucked. Clippy didn't sick a virtual dog on you that followed you everywhere you went, logged your personal communications, and reported them to the police under the guise of wanting to protect the children. Clippy just wanted to help. Clippy protected the children too, while preserving their privacy. That's it for today, and as always, I hope you learned something. I'll see you in the next video. Bye now.
We also have the duty not to infringe the IP rights in the process. It is in fact the manufacturers who have the relevant rights, not consumers.
Fulu? What is Fulu? Is that something that Luis made? Not gonna lie, but this is South Park, I think? Yeah. Was it South Park or was it Simpsons? Or maybe it was a little bit of each. That they had at some points episodes that were ahead of their time at the time it was made or aired the first time. And you know, now we can just, you know, refer to that and everyone gets it that saw those. I don't know if it's funny or sad, but
I just reversed engineered a $20,000 military IP mesh radio using open source
mesh radio. Okay.
parts totaling only $106.23. Sure, the government has been known to overpay for things, but I could build about 200 of these for the price of a single unit of theirs. And last week, I posted about this on Reddit, and a few days later, the US military contacted me.
Uptime 2 hours 42 minutes.
Build with parallel. I wonder if this is like someone that is trying to scam him off the prototype to, you know, start to make that and sell that as like, what is it called? Company espionage or something like that? Or if this is like real and serious, and then I would be wondering like, why the fuck? It's not like he reverse engineered it, right?
Fortunately, not to shut me down, but just looking for advice, which I gotta say, felt pretty good.
The true power of ATAC is being able to get situational awareness.
Oh, he actually went protocol, okay.
In the palm of your hand. Usually that was reserved to kind of your TOCs, right? Your tactical operations centers where commanders and planners could see the...
What is this?
big picture. But when you enable warfighter, which is something I think that the current Army and military, Marines, Air Force, I mean, they are trying to get there, but they're just also kind of, because of their own procurement processes, they're going about in a very, very slow manner. Like,
Not gonna lie, I'm also looking into some kind of, or I was also looking into some kind of a mesh that would be based either on Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, and that would be like an app on the phone for communication, and basically that way it doesn't depend on the internet. It's kind of decentralized in a way. And there were actually two things that I found as possible candidates out there already. But yeah, being able to make a mesh network that can span quite a distance is also something I'm looking forward to do if I have time.
and you got to test, and everybody has an opinion about some piece of kit, right? So it's very challenging in that aspect. But the way special operations used it, and now you can go onto a target and then you can see where everybody's at. You can coordinate fires. Hell, there's some apps in there where you can send through either Link 16 or Saddle straight to a fast mover to drop a bomb on target. Target. We used it in other ways, such as helicopter, interdictions. The Bloodhound tool is very, very useful. We know how long it would take us to get somewhere. We would be able to pull the metadata off of video feeds so that we know exactly where that vehicle was, and it would cut that time down. We also used it for what we call mad minutes, where we had to shift target. We had to come up with a plan really quickly. Usually it was a bunch of guys huddled up against a helo and coming up with a hasty plan. It was we could do it all from our phone. We can watch the video right in the palm of our hand. So when you network ATAC, it becomes extremely more powerful.
But what did I just build, and what exactly does it enable, and why is it ruffling so many feathers? Freedom Tech is finally catching up. I'm talking about decentralized, open source tools that you actually own, built by companies that encourage
So he has Starlink, LiFePro battery, probably 12 volt. Something that looks like DC to DC. Raspberry Pi. And possibly some antennas.
instead of suing you for it. That's something I can get behind. It's that Southern engineering grit I admire.
5,000 milliampere hours. Okay. I still don't fully understand why most of the batteries are defining the capacity in milliampere hours when they could just say ampere hours instead if it's thousands. I mean, probably people would think that it's small size because the number is small. That's the only logical explanation that I could find about like why is this a thing. Like if you have battery that is 5,000, why don't you say as 5 ampere hours instead of milliampere hours? But why lithium ion batteries? Interesting.
Making gear tougher, smarter, and more useful by pushing it past the limits, and being able to sideload, extend, and overclock my tech to do things nobody thought is possible. That's exactly what this channel is all about. This device creates a private portable IP network, but let's see how far it can go and what bandwidth it can support. I'm heading into a signal dead zone, and I'm bringing nothing but a Starlink and 2 Wi-Fi Halo nodes. Can I create a fully functional long-range wireless internet network from scratch and actually use it for real-world practical uses like chat messages, GPS coordination, push-to-talk, ATAC, video streaming, and internet connections? This feels like reliving the glory days of walkie-talkies as a kid, except now it's upgraded to the latest Wi-Fi standards. We're talking 802.11s mesh and 802.11ah Halo. So instead of just goofing around in the backyard, you're running a legit long-range encrypted internet network. And the DoD may or may not want a word with you. If this doesn't work, I may have wasted a lot of time and a lot of money. But if it does work, this changes everything. But before breaking into it, just what the heck is this thing? Okay, let's keep this dead simple. It's a mainnet, which stands for Mobile Ad Hoc Network. It sounds complicated, but all it means is it's a self-contained portable node that links up with others just like it. Each one of these nodes is built around a small computer, usually a Raspberry Pi, running an open source router software called OpenWRT. That's the brains. On board, you still get traditional Wi-Fi, dual band 2.4 and 5 gig, running an open source router software called OpenWRT. That's the brains. On board, you still get traditional Wi-Fi, dual band 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, which gives you a couple hundred feet of coverage, which is fine if you're in the same cabin or campsite, but it's not enough if you need to reach miles down the trail. That's where Halo comes in. When short-range Wi-Fi can't reach, Halo links your nodes to other nodes, and with clear line of sight, it can stretch stretched several miles. That's the backbone that ties the whole mesh together. And here's the part most people miss. Once you have your radio, you don't really need special gear to use it. You just connect your phone over Wi-Fi the same way you'd connect on
So is this Halo something like LoRa?
an airplane network. No SIM cards, no carrier, no big tech permission slip. And once you're in, you can run apps like ATAC, which automatically discovers other nodes, push-to-talk radios, chat relays, and if one node has an uplink, say Starlink, literally any other internet app can be used. And because these nodes run on 802.11s mesh, every node that joins strengthens and extends the network. Add more nodes and the coverage grows. Picture a convoy of trucks on an off-road trail, each carrying a node. Now the whole team has comms, live positioning, even internet with no towers, no ISP, and no monthly bill. That's a mainnet. Everything I'm showing here, gear setup, config, it's all in a field manual I put together linked below. I'm calling it the Haven IP Mesh Radio. It's an open source alternative to radios like the MPU-5, except instead
Yay, called it. Okay.
of $20,000 and a procurement officer, you just need a Raspberry Pi and some grit. Now, I've had this guide live for about a week and people are already building with it. But starting today for the next 30 orders, I'm including a bonus 30-minute one-on-one call with me to go over your setup, answer questions, or just talk shop. I'm capping this at 30 because I literally can't take more calls without melting my calendar. So if you're watching this and the link's still active, jump in. And super quick, if you like the tech but don't want to build it out yourself, Trey over at Murrow's X is building these to order. These are IP mesh radios, very similar to what we're talking about here, and he's super knowledgeable, and the design is, I mean, you just can't beat this design. It's incredible. So now that we've got our two nodes set up, we're going to want to see what kind of data rate and bandwidth we can get. So Halo supports different channel widths, very similar to spreading factor with Meshtastic, which you can choose right in the OpenWRT UI. All right, so I do want to run you through the anatomy of this thing pretty quickly here. So it's pretty kind of modular in the sense that like any component of this you could probably swap out for something else, but I'll run you through what I have here. So the motherboard here is a Raspberry Pi 4.
Now, I'm gonna be repeating myself a little bit, but my question is, could you replace the Raspberry Pi board with Raspberry Pi Zero and have smaller power draw? Would it still perform the same?
We use the 4, not the 5,
And smaller power draw means it will last longer.
because some of the OpenWRT firmware doesn't quite work on the 5 yet. As soon as it does, we'll start using the 5 because the 5 is more powerful, frankly. And then we have a hat for a mini PCIe card. And the PCIe card, or the mini PCIe card that we want to use here, is what introduces the Halo chip. This thing's not expensive. It's about 15 bucks for the card there, and then it's maybe like 20 bucks for the hat. And so we add that on to the Raspberry Pi. You can use any sort of antenna that is sub-gigahertz. Right now I'm just playing around with this big fancy antenna, but frankly, you can get away with antennas like this. You can get away with whip antennas. Any of your Meshtastic antennas will work because they're in the same range. and then it just uses an SMA to U.FL connector here, so you can really do that however you want. And then for power, just to make it mobile, I'm using this wave share hat that actually relies on pogo pins. You can see them right there. So you just put it on top, and then you put these batteries in. These are 21700s. Each one is 5,000 milliamperes, so total of 10,000 milliamperes capacity, which is pretty solid actually. And you really don't have to move this around. If you want to charge it, you just plug in the USB-C. But then you have your kind of self-contained unit here. And then the only other component, so this is a Wi-Fi dongle. This brings 2.4 and 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi to the setup. Technically, the Raspberry Pi can support that on
I was about to say that.
board, but it can't do Halo with that, unfortunately. So as kind of an intermediary solution, we could use something like this. In the future, I want to use a proper hat with a real Wi-Fi chip. Like this is an Intel chip, and you could put like real 2.4 and 5 gigahertz antennas, and it could be a lot cleaner of a setup. Frankly, it's such early days that I don't even have like
Also better gain and signal than such a small Wi-Fi.
a proper case for this. The individual who's working on Open Mainnet is working on a 3D printing design case, so we could use that, or you can kind of just get creative with what you want. But that's the basic setup of this thing. So we're not talking a whole lot of money to get this thing up and running. So I'm actually getting Wi-Fi out here, but it's not coming across the standard Wi-Fi connection. It's coming across Ethernet, and it's coming across the 915 megahertz antenna. You can see it's pretty slow, but it is loading, and really we just wanted to do some tests, so we'll run those tests. So I'm watching one of my own YouTube videos, and I'm doing it by way of this 915 megahertz sub-gigahertz antenna that is connected to a Halo chip on a Raspberry Pi and then going into my laptop over Ethernet. But what's interesting is the router that this is connecting to is actually way up there, and it's able to pass my home wireless connection to this device because it's using the Halo antenna with a 1 megahertz channel width, which means it can go super far. Here's what I achieved with my performance tests. At 8 megahertz, I measured about 15 megabits per second, both up and down, which is right on the theoretical ceiling for a Wi-Fi Halo at that channel width. At 4 megahertz, throughput landed at 7.3 megabits, again matching.
I mean, it's not amazing, but if the other options that you have at the location that you're at are either similar or even worse, then I'll take that.
The expected max. At 2 megahertz, I actually clocked 4.4 megabits, just a hair above textbook 3.9, well within margin for how iPerf reports traffic. And at the narrowest 1 megahertz channel, I got 1.8 megabits, which lines up almost exactly with the 1.95 megabits theoretical limit.
So why was his speed test smaller than that?
Out of the box, these Halo radios ship at about 21 dBm. That's roughly 125 milliwatts. Pretty modest, not much more than a home router. But with the Open Mainnet firmware, which is the open source package that this is based on, that ceiling gets raised to 27 dBm, which is around 500 milliwatts. That's almost 4 times the wattage, which makes a huge difference in link stability and range. And just for context, the legal limit for unlicensed 900 megahertz gear in the US is 30 dBm, which is the equivalent of 1 full watt. That's the absolute max you can transmit without a special license.
Well, I don't live in US, so maybe the rules are different.
So at 27 dBm, we're sitting right near the top of what's possible for a civilian build, just shy of the legal ceiling. You get the benefits of serious range and resilience while staying inside of the regulatory box. Now, one quick myth buster. Bandwidth isn't set by the antenna. It's set by the modulation and channel width in the radio. But the antenna does matter for range. A higher gain antenna can focus the signal, letting you hold a link further out or punch through interference. So swapping antennas won't make your network faster, but it can make it go a whole lot farther. And OpenWRT gives you a full suite of diagnostic throughput testing, range tests, and live packet stats. So the takeaway is simple. In real-world conditions, my test basically hit the ceiling of what 802.11ah can do. Wide channels gives you max bandwidth, narrow channels stretch your range. So now what can we do at this? Well, that's where it gets interesting. The most obvious application that comes to mind is ATAC, which is Android Tactical Awareness Kit, which is used by the military and domestic search and rescue teams for operatives which require several team members staying connected in highly dynamic situations. Now, there's a number of different ways to leverage ATAC, but with this setup, I was able to get the devices connected from mainnet 1 to mainnet 2 without using any sort of fancy TAC servers. There was a little bit of finessing on the network layer, and if you're trying to get that working, just don't think you're not going to learn about subnetting in the process. But I can provide some of those details in my guide, and I was able to...
Subnetting is not an issue for me. Anything network related, I can cover, no problem.
Send ATAC messages from a device connected to mainnet 1 over Halo to a device connected to mainnet 2. I was also able to do a couple other fancy things like drop images onto the map and share those between nodes. And I was able to do that using something called multicasting, which is essentially making use of the Wi-Fi network to send those communications, but there was no sort of centralized remote or even local TAC server. So it sends it directly from device to device by IP address on the network. And I gotta say, I really like that setup because everything is confined within your private network and you're able to push communications to each other, track nodes on a map, and have those sort of off-grid comms that you usually only normally get with a satellite connection. But what about voice and push to talk? So I actually set up Mumble on both of the devices.
Oh.
And I didn't go too crazy with it. I used a remote Mumble server, but I was easily able to push voice from node to node using one of those public servers.
So there's like, in Google App Store, there's like, what, 3, 6, and 5 of those are actually plugins. Mapping, navigation, nodes. Okay, interesting.
Now, you would never actually want to do that. You would want to set up a Mumble server on one of your Raspberry Pis, but that should be easy enough. And the latency was pretty low and the quality was pretty high. But anyways, this is push to talk. It works just fine. It's using one of the uplinks connecting to a remote server on the web, but the signal is still going from mainnet node number 1 to mainnet node number 2, and they're only connected by Wi-Fi Halo. So you could go long range with it, and you can see the clarity and the latency is more than adequate. Next is video feeds. So I didn't go too crazy with it, but again, I was able to set up a video stream from a device that was also on the network, which is this Chow here. This was actually also using Halo. You don't necessarily have to use Halo. You could use something like IP cameras, or you could set up a stream on a laptop or a drone or something like that. But as long as it's using a standard, either UDP, RTSP, HTTP, one of those live video streams in a standard protocol, you can pull it up on your ATAC device, provided it's on the same network. Okay, and then the big test was going to a remote off-grid area, so I went down to Crandon Park, which is basically a key off of Miami. Now I had both of my main nets, but I also had something else, an uplink. So I just purchased a Dishy, which is a standard Starlink, and I plugged that into node number 1, which means that my whole network had internet. But just how far could I push it? So I took node number 2 out for a stroll, and we just kept going, periodically checking the connection. Okay, so now we're trying to get the Halo mainnet plugged into the Starlink router, and this will be node number 1. So we have the Halo chip with the Halo antenna, which is going up here, and it's using the Starlink Wi-Fi router. So that should just bring Halo to this Starlink network here.
Yep, I called it. That's his setup. 300 watt hours. And DC to DC is used for powering the DC. I wonder what power it requires. Is it step up or step down? Also, oh yeah, he's using a normal power bank for the Raspberry Pi. That's a little bit sad.
All right, so we're trying to get Starlink online here. Looks like it might work. I had to use a Life PO4 battery with a special, I don't know, sort of like regulator, governor of some type. And then the Starlink itself is right up here. Because I'm not using a Starlink Mini, I'm actually using the standard one because it gets better throughput, but it's a little bit harder to power. But I think this is gonna work. It looks like the app is still thinking about it right now, determining alignment, adjustment may be necessary. So, looks like it.
You know, if you need 12-volt source, your car has a battery, and you possibly have either a USB-C or you know, cigarette lighter port, either in your trunk or between the driver and passenger. But of course, granted, I don't know for how long you want to run this experiment, and then of course, if your battery in the car is dead, you don't go anywhere after the experiment, so it's understandable. But the battery is so small. I don't think he actually used or planned to use much power, so he could have just used the car.
It might work though, so we'll see. Okay, so it says we're online, so that actually wasn't too painful. Let's see real quick what we're getting in the way of speed tests, right? So let's go run one of these. All right, so not too bad, I'll take it. So 22 down, 3 up.
So it's something like if you have an LTE modem or 4G on your mobile phone with a data plan, something similar.
But it looks like the software is still updating, so we'll see if perhaps that gets improved.
Oh, okay, I see.
Okay, I'm going to give you a little rundown of everything we have going on here. So this is going to be a test of our mainnet. So mobile ad hoc network node number 1, mobile ad hoc network node number 2, primarily talking over Wi-Fi Halo. But I also wanted to bring an uplink to the party. So let me go ahead and show you what we have in terms of the configuration here. So down here, you're going to see, so down here, you see the Raspberry Pi. This is our Wi-Fi Halo board. This is the mainnet, essentially, right? It's Ethernetted into the Starlink router. I'm doing some crazy stuff with batteries because this is not a Starlink Mini. This is a Starlink Standard. So, but it seems to be working, and it didn't give me too much trouble. So in terms of the Wi-Fi Halo antenna, that is right here. This is magnetized, so I can just pop it on like that. Our dishy is right there, and the uplink works, has internet connection. It's not super fast right now, but I'll worry about that later. So now what I'm going to try to do is get the second mainnet going and see how far I can push it, because we have a lot of space here. So that's my objective right now. Okay, so we actually have everything working now. This right here is node number 2. I have the mainnet right there, and I'm running Ethernet into my computer, and we can see that we have internet, even though my computer is not on Wi-Fi. So we have about 14, 15 down, which tracks perfectly because the internet's coming over Wi-Fi Halo at an 8 megahertz width, and the theoretical max for that is like 17 megabits per second, and it's got the same down, so symmetric link. So everything's actually working. Now, normally you would connect your mainnet to your end user devices like your ATAC devices. You would connect that over Wi-Fi, but that's just an extra step that I didn't want to get into right now because I'm still awaiting that piece. That's just a little Wi-Fi dongle. So you would just keep your radio on you, and then you'd have a local Wi-Fi network, and then Halo for the long distance stuff. But the question is now, how far can we still get a signal, right? And at what data lengths? And so I'm going to give that a shot. Okay, so I have my little radio station here. I'm on the move here.
So that's what it was. I was like, what is that?
I just did a test. This is node number 2, and I got 6 megabits per second down and 14 megabits per second up. And the second node is that white car way, 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 way over there. But I was watching YouTube. I'm watching YouTube because of the sub-gigahertz Wi-Fi.
Oh, it looks like a racetrack. I was like, what kind of place is that?
Halo radio. So now we're gonna go even further. Okay, so we're right here. This is our mainnet here. We're way, way further out. Probably coming up on a mile.
Wait. Why did he had to wait for extra part that was a Wi-Fi dongle? If he wanted to use either a laptop or a phone to connect to that bridge that he made with the radio. Could have just used the Wi-Fi on the Raspberry Pi, no?
Maybe.
What am I missing?
Still getting internet here, although it was beginning to break down a little bit. Let's see if we can do a speed test. Whoa. Here we go. All right, so now we're not even quite hitting a megabit per second, but close to a megabit down. Let's see what we get for up. For some reason, the uplink is better. And a couple megabits per second is still quite a bit to work with in terms of voice, low rate video, stuff like that.
Also, the latency is kind of impressive.
Uptime 3 hours, 12 minutes, 12 seconds.
So I'd actually be curious if we can get any significant video here. So I'm gonna put this in.
You could if you would be uploading.
One of my hands, which I really don't have a free hand here. And then we're gonna go back to YouTube. Let's see here. See if anything comes through. This microchip can extend your Wi-Fi over 10 months. So we're watching YouTube videos using the 915 antenna, and my Starlink is way out there. So we're in a remote area, we're near a beach, we have no fiber, anything like that. We just have a Starlink. I'm about a mile away, and we're still watching YouTube videos. Call me impressed. And now we've got proof that this little box can keep up with the big boys. So at 2,000 feet, I was getting shy of 1 megabit per second down and almost 3 megabits per second up, which interestingly was enough for me to continue watching YouTube, which just felt surreal. I was 2,000 feet away from my Starlink, and still able to watch YouTube, all due to Wi-Fi Halo. Now, to be clear, this is the civvy version. It's absolutely usable in the field, but it's not military spec. It's not guaranteed to survive a Humvee rollover or keep sinking after a week in the desert. Think of it as the civilian alternative, open source, flexible, and cheap enough to actually build yourself. Also, I'm not here to push more screens into more places, but I've been out where phones die and help's not coming. And that's where tools like this might have a place. And if the tech encourages people to get outside and explore, then I support that too. Now, I know what you're all thinking. What about security? But rest assured, Halo radios use WPA3-SAE, the same encryption handshake you'll find on modern enterprise Wi-Fi. It's strong, it's proven, and yes, everything running on this mesh is locked down. So this isn't some open Wild West signal that anyone can hijack. It's encrypted end-to-end, just like you'd expect. Now you might be thinking, this looks like LoRa or Meshtastic, but here's the difference. LoRa is brilliant for ultra low bandwidth over long range with very low power draw. It's perfect for text and GPS pings, but it tops out at kilobits per second. It's like walkie-talkie but for data. Wi-Fi Halo, on the other hand, runs in the megabits per second range. That's the difference between just sending a ping and streaming a video feed. And the big kicker is Halo supports full IP networking. This isn't a custom packet form, it's real internet. You can run ATAC, push-to-talk apps, webcams, even route traffic straight through Starlink. It's literally plug-and-play networking, just stretched for range. So if Meshtastic is your digital walkie-talkie, Halo is your portable router for the middle of nowhere. Look at me, I am the ISP now. For more killer tech, click here.
Anyway, let's call this the obvious end for today. And you all have a good night. Another workday is awaiting us tomorrow. Or today, depending on the angle. Anyway, have a good night.